The others were a little too far to see just what was genuinely happening. They stood just outside the booth and were watching from both sides. One side, with Quinn's group on the left, and the other side with Zach's group. Each of their teams stood behind their teammates, which meant Quinn had his back facing against Fex. So even with his excellent eyesight, he didn't know what was going on and was unable to see that the influence skill was currently active. Quinn had never even thought about using the influence skill to get rid of this whole matter. Zach being a level 6 ability user usually meant one would have a strong mind and willpower. This wasn't always the case, but more so than not. In the past, something like this would have never worked. However, there were two things that had changed since the last time. The first being that Quinn had increased his charm points quite a bit. The second was due to the pressure and frightening things that had happened so far. Zach's mind was very unstable. He didn't quite know what was going on, and because of this, the influence skill had a great effect. "You're going to leave that crystal behind and leave this place," Quinn ordered. At that moment, Zach obediently followed, pulling the intermediate crystal from his pouch and placing it on the floor. Soon after, he already left, and the others followed. "Well, that went a lot smoother than I thought it would," Fex said. After picking up the crystal and placing it in his pocket, his mood had calmed down, and his eye color had returned to normal. "Well, that was fun, wasn't it?" he said, facing the others. Seeing this, Vorden felt like Quinn was acting a little bipolar. Just moments ago, his voice sounded like he would snap Zach's head apart, but now he seemed to be over the moon. However, Vorden didn't say anything, as he really wasn't the one to talk about a person having mood swings. Just then, the admin man had entered the room. The other student had left to join the others when he saw Zach and them going. "What happened?" the man said with his hands held above his head. The top part of the machine was smashed to bits. It was beyond repair. A whole new machine would need to be ordered. "We should have told those guys to stay behind," said Fex. "Now, we're going to get the blame and have to pay for this." The man was about to tear them a new one, telling the kids how they should respect the property that wasn't owned by them. But when seeing the large number in the room, indicating which booth this was, he quickly realized it was the same one from the video. "Did you do this?" the man asked, looking at Quinn. The video that was shown was from the top right. In the video, one was unable to see the face but could see all the actions performed. The only thing that could be seen was the black curly hair. "Yes, it was me," Quinn replied. "No, you idiot. Why do you have to be so honest? Just say it was the others who ran away." Fex said. "They have the incident on video anyway," Sam said. "On the video, there will be no proof that the others did anything and would just show Quinn kicking the top part. So it's best not to lie." The students stood there worried for Quinn. The man was quite large, and they were afraid of the consequences they might have to face. "If you need to, I can pay for the machine," Vorden offered. "I can chip in as well," Fex added. "Me too," Sam replied, feeling a little awkward if he didn't offer as well after everyone else had done. But he wasn't rich like the others, and really didn't want them to take him up on his offer. The man looked at Quinn. If he was the one in the video, it was expected that something like this might have happened. "You have good friends. Accidents like this can happen. Don't worry about it, and don't let it happen again," the man said. They were shocked at the response, but decided to try to leave as soon as possible and not argue back with the results. There was a good chance that the man might change his mind, so they quickly decided to leave the place. "Make sure I don't see you here again," the man shouted at them with a smile. The four boys were back out of the platform, and the night sky was now fully out. The stars could be seen above them, and it looked beautiful. Most of the students who were on the platform before had already headed back to their hotel to get some sleep. Although there was no curfew, students were expected to watch the matches that started early in the morning. The group continued to walk in a circle on the platform and reached Sam's hotel. Before parting ways, Sam wanted to get as much information out of Quinn as possible. "You were really skillful back there. I can't believe what you did. You know, I feel slightly embarrassed now that I offered to help you when you didn't really need it," Sam said, laughing. "Don't worry about it," Quinn replied. "You offered to help even though you didn't know us. In this world, there aren't many who would do that. If you don't mind me asking, how did you do that with the machine earlier? How can you move so fast? Is it something to do with your ability?" Sam asked. Quinn thought a bit about what to say before answering, but he knew he couldn't take too long, otherwise Sam would get suspicious. Still, he didn't see Sam as a bad person but still couldn't tell him the truth. I don't have an ability. That's why it shows I'm a level 1. Because of this, my parents trained me on how to fight since I was young. I focused just on using martial arts. I thought if I got good enough and got some decent beast gear, then maybe I can still make it in this world. Quinn explained, is getting better at lying. I don't know if that's really a good thing, though. Vorden thought. With that, the group continued to talk for a bit before parting ways. Sam headed back to his hotel room, while the others continued to walk to their own hotel. Saying one has no ability is a good way to hide your actual ability. It's a shame you won't be participating in this tournament, Quinn. It would have been able to see you up against Nate. Sam thought. Although he couldn't confirm Quinn was the Blood Volver, he didn't really need to. The main thing was, Sam felt like he had got on well with Quinn. If he were actually the Blood Volver, it would only make things more interesting. There was no rush on his end. There was still a week left to try to find out the truth. Back at the gaming area, the admin who had let Quinn and his group go was in the camera room. He had finished cleaning up the bits and pieces and had closed off the booth to be used by the public. Inside the room, he watched Quinn's video fighting against the level 4 machine again. Every time he watched, he got excited. He also further watched what had happened after the events, seeing that Quinn had saved his fellow teammate and kicked the machine out of harm's way. I was right to not blame them for what happened, he thought. Still, there was another reason why the man had let them go without paying for anything. The video had been cut down, only showing Quinn's actions during the level 4 game. Then, once the video file was downloaded, the man went onto one of the students' internal video sharing platforms and clicked upload. A bar started to fill on the screen, and the number eventually reached 100%. This video doesn't deserve only to be seen by me, the man said. Soon, all the students in the military base would see Quinn's amazing feat. Arriving at the arena, Silver felt better than she had done in a while. It had been a long month and a bit spent at the Academy military base. She wished to return home, but would never do so until she had completed a task. Now that it felt like she was drawing close, her mood was starting to change. As she left the hotel room to head outside, she passed many of the students she had taught. I hope you have a good day, miss. Stay safe. I wish I look as pretty as her when I grow up. The students couldn't help but praise Miss Silver. Although she had been strict in class, her lessons were quite knowledgeable. Her lessons were also enjoyable, as it seemed like when Silver taught, she had no filter. When speaking, she would never sugarcoat her words like the other teachers. In the middle of the class, the boys would often compliment her or ask her about certain subjects. When replying, she would do so bluntly, embarrassing them and speaking what was on her mind. As days went on, the students started to learn what Silver was like and realized she meant no harm from her words. At first, she found the compliments annoying, but over time she grew to enjoy the words. When I go back, will Father praise me for doing a good job? She thought. Everything she had done so far was for the family, and she would continue to do so. Yet not even once had her father, the family leader, praised her. Unlike here, where she heard kind words every day. Before she knew it, she had already left the arena and was just outside on the ground floor. It was a habit for her to want to be alone whenever she got upset. Usually, a few moments later, and her idiot of a brother Fex would come and cheer her up. After she had calmed down, her plan was to head back into the arena and search around on the top floor to see if she could find any information or maybe even spot Fex. The quicker she brought him home, the less time she would have to spend here. However, a strange sweet smell had reached her nose, one she was familiar with but hadn't smelt in a long time. The smell of blood. Wondering why she would smell the scent of human blood outside, she quickly rushed over to the scene. Eventually, the trail of blood led her to a bald-headed man with a sword by his side. When she saw that no one was hurt, she slowed down her stride and started to walk. The smell was still coming from the direction of the man, and that's when her eyes were glued onto a particular object he held in his hand. It was a metallic flask, but not just any flask. A flask that bore the symbol of the Sanguini's family. Knowing that Fex was at one of the academies, her mind instantly thought the flask belonged to him. The question was, why was this man holding onto Fex's flask that was filled with blood? From his scent alone, she could tell he wasn't a vampire. "Where did you get that flask?" Silver asked. Leo tried to see if he could recognize the voice, but it was not one he knew of. He was quite new to the military, so he still hadn't memorized all of the other generals and sergeants' aura of voices either. But if one was able to get into this facility, he had to assume they were a member of staff. Yet, the first question she asked when meeting him was about the flask. Judging by the tone of her voice, she had to be either someone of equal rank or someone above. No student would dare talk to a sergeant like this. "Who are you?" Leo asked. "State your name and rank." Although Leo had spoken, the words didn't really process through Silver's mind. She was too concerned with her own question. Fex would have never let something so precious fall into the hands of another unless something serious had happened. Did the humans find out about him and kill him? Regardless, the flask was an important piece of equipment that could possibly link the humans to them. She needed to get rid of it. Flicking out one of her fingers, a small piece of string shot out straight, aiming for the flask in Leo's hand. Not wanting to cause a scene, she would take the flask and try to find out more later. The piece of string was so thin, and it was dark outside, making it practically invisible. But before the string could even reach the flask, a slicing sound was heard, and then a short click followed after. The piece of string then fell onto the floor. When looking at Leo, she could see the flask had now been put away into his side pouch, while his hand was on the hilt of his sword. "You cut the string, but how did you see it?" she asked, shocked by what had just happened. But Silver wasn't the only one shocked. He was surprised that the girl was also able to see him move his sword so fast. "I didn't," Leo replied as he pointed to his eyes with his other hand. "Can't you tell? I'm blind." Leo expected at least a chuckle from Silver. Usually, these types of words would at least give him a response. Instead, Silver stood there still like a statue. Not even her expression had changed. When checking out her aura, there wasn't even a little flicker, and still, her aura seemed to be masked. "If you're blind, then I don't have to worry about you seeing my face," she said as she dashed forward. Withdrawing his sword from his sheath, a large pressurized air slice came out from the sword. Sensing the strong power that was just unleashed, Silver knew she needed to do something about it. One moment she was directly in front of Leo, the next she was behind him. Silver struck towards his chest, thinking the whole thing would be over, but as if Leo had eyes on the back of his head, he was able to dodge by ducking down. He then pivoted his foot, spinning his body around while throwing out his blade towards the middle of her body. This time, the attack was too fast for her to move. Instead, at just the right time, she opened up her palms and slapped at the sword from the bottom and the top. Using all her strength, she was able to stop the sword just in time. The sword was held in her hands, just a few inches away from her body. From the outside, it looked like neither one of them was moving an inch. But the truth was, they were both using their full strength, but their power was equal, not allowing the other one to budge. "Is this her natural strength?" Leo thought. "I've even activated the beast armor underneath my clothing, and still, I can't overpower her." From Leo's ability, he was able to tell if his opponent had high-level beast gear that was currently activated to enhance the user's strength. There was a possibility that the opponent he was fighting against was able to mask their equipment as well, but it was unlikely. The stalemate continued for a while, but both knew this was useless. "Your voice sounds pretty. If it sounded as good as you looked, I might let you win this one," Leo said, hoping to break her concentration for just a second. However, it didn't seem to work. Instead, her eyebrows and face started to scrunch up. She started to concentrate even more, and the top of her forehead started to sweat a little. Silver hadn't run out of options. She still had her many vampire abilities. The problem was quite a few of them required her to look into her opponent's eyes, and that didn't quite work well against Leo. Other than that, the blood abilities would be a dead giveaway and would leave behind a trace. Instead, she chose to push her body even further, ever so slightly. With one of her hands, she carefully positioned her fingers so now it was held both on top and under the blade. Then slowly with her other, she let go. Now, Silver was holding back Leo with a single hand, but she knew she couldn't do this for long. With her other hand free, quickly she started to twirl her fingers, and multiple strings started to shout out, The target wasn't Leo himself, but instead, they were heading for his pouch. The first set of strings lifted it open, while the next grabbed onto the flask. After slightly moving her finger, like a web, she was able to draw it into her hand. "Don't make me come back to kill you," she said, as she quickly fled the scene at an amazing speed. Leo prepared himself to perform another quick set of slashes. If he threw out multiple strikes now, there was a chance one of them could hit her and slow her down. Midway through his attack, though, he stopped himself. She couldn't have come all this way just for that. It seems whoever owned that item is quite important. From the location of where the flask was found and the story of the other students, he could tell that the flask most likely belonged to one of them. He had planned to return it at one point, but not until he fully found out the flask's use. He never did in the end. But now he felt like he had a more interesting tale to follow. While running back to her room, Silver looked at her hand and could see a cut. "That human hurt me." The first day had passed, which meant it was finally time. It was time for the first day of events. The schedule was like so. Each day, the first round for every category of events would happen. Several smaller events would take place at the same time. In comparison, the 3 main events would be shown one by one. On the top platform where all the students were, there were several screens spread throughout the arena with a number on its side. Each student was handed over a pamphlet at their hotel, which indicated the schedule of events which would be showing on which screens. The top platforms would also be available for the public during this time. This meant that those that had arrived from other planets and factions were also able to watch closely at the events taking place. When the main events were to be shown in the afternoon, all the screens would change to focus on them, and the public would have to watch the events directly in the arena. Underneath the arena, most of the participants had woken up early. The first events didn't start until closer to midday, but still, the nerves and excitement got the better of them, and nearly everyone had woken up early. The sleeping quarters for the events were just as nice as the hotel, but were set out differently. There was only one floor, and each of the rooms was next to each other. But they had the basics for everyone: a computer, a bed, toilet, and shower. The computer was there so the students could still enjoy their free time and research on whatever doubts they had while also updating themselves about the ongoing news. It would also allow them to communicate with other students. The separation was to allow them to focus and to sort out the formalities with all the students taking part in the events. There was a large number of people, and with several military bases taking part, it was easier to communicate and organize things this way. When the event was over or when a student was knocked out, they would be free to head to the hotel where their military base had its accommodation. Peter, of course, had restricted access compared to the others. There was no computer in his room, and a guard was stationed outside his door during the whole night. When Layla had left her room in the morning, she went out and started to head to the target practice area. While walking, her legs were a little wobbly, and she had quite the bags under her eyes. Her body felt weak, and the energy was drained from her. One wouldn't expect this type of reaction from some of the participants, as they really cared for an event like this. But for Layla, this was not the case. She had no reason to care for the tournament. Win or lose, it didn't matter. Her life was already predetermined. She wasn't going to get good grades and join the military or faction after this. She couldn't even become a solo traveler if she wanted to. This became more apparent to her last night, and this was the real reason why she felt like this. Last night she had hardly gotten any sleep. When entering her room, she had prepared to have a nice rest. She had made a warm bath and placed the right amount of bath salts and solutions into the tub. She had never experienced pampering like this and just wanted to enjoy it for once. However, fate was quite cruel to her. The sound of a message being received was heard on her computer. "That's strange. I didn't sign into anything right. I don't think I even touched the computer. Maybe the person before forgot to log out," she said as she started to walk over. However, even the thought of someone forgetting to log out was strange. Technology had come quite a way, and the computer was able to tell who was actually at the computer at the time through the camera. If it wasn't the correct person or the user wasn't seen, it would generally disconnect from whatever it was connected to. Still, this just made Layla even more curious. When she looked at the screen, her heart felt like it skipped a beat. The towel she had covering herself had fallen out of her hands, and she didn't even bother to cover up her bare naked body. On the computer screen was an envelope with a crest attached in red. It imitated the letters from the old times when wax used to be used to seal essential letters. In this case, the seal being used was an angel with its wings having been removed falling to the side. It was a letter from Pure. They had their ways of getting information to their members. Pure, in reality, was a much bigger and more influential group than the government would have liked the public to know. Layla's hand was shaking as she went to select the letter. What could they want now? Do they want me to do something? Maybe even attempt to assassinate someone? Thoughts were running through her head. There were many different tasks an agent needed to do, and she felt quite lucky when they told her to just gather information about the academy as she saw fit. The letter could very well be her first real mission. Eventually, she plucked up the courage and clicked on the letter. The digital screen imitated the seal being open and the contents of the letter was shown. Agent 100, you have been ordered to lose and drop out of the tournament as soon as possible. The contents of the letter were short, and it didn't expand on instructions or even explain why. It was merely telling her to purposely lose her next match. Her bath time was ruined, and her whole night for that matter. The task was an easy one, and she was thankful for that. She wasn't really going to try in the event anyway. Still, she couldn't help but wonder why it was so important for her to drop out of the event. The only thing it would allow her to do was a return to the other's side. Are they planning an attack? This dreaded thought had now chilled her mind. If they weren't planning an attack, they were planning something big. Every year this event took place, and so far they had never targeted it. It was expected at some point they would, and this might very well be the year. Having arrived at the target practice area, Layla started to notice something strange. The other students seemed to be huddled up in groups and were talking about something. She was able to catch a few words here or there, and she had also expected them to be talking about their upcoming events. Hey, did you see that video? Yeah, it went viral pretty quickly. Do you think you could do that? Are you crazy? It must be fake, right? But it happened, hey. It was one of the students from the bases. Look at the date and time stamp, and even in the description they mentioned what had happened. That's what I don't understand, though. Clearly, this person was a skilled fighter. But if this happened yesterday at the arcades up top, then that means he isn't a participant in any of the events. Even if he had a weak ability, there is even a martial arts event. Heck, there's an event based on this very game. So why didn't he join? Without any context to what the students were talking about, Layla was perplexed and was quite curious as well. That's when she heard her name being called out from behind. Hey, Layla! Dut! Logan shouted. Do you have a second? As soon as Logan had left his room, he had been looking around to try to find Layla, trying to see if she had heard or seen the video herself. Standing upright, trying to make herself look energized, Layla turned around. What's up? Judging by you not saying anything, I guess you haven't seen. Logan then placed out his hand, and the little spiders from his suit started to detach themselves until eventually they formed a small screen and tablet. The video was a recording of one of the gaming booths from the top left corner. The student was angled, and the camera was positioned slightly behind so one could see the machine as well as the student's fast hand movements. What was shown was a student being able to clear a level 4 game, while the machine itself looked like it hadn't moved an inch. Layla had tried one of these machines before and could see how impressive it was. In the video, the figurehead had been altered and blurred thanks to the uploader wanting to keep the person's identity a secret. It's cool and all. No wonder everyone is talking about it. But why did you want to show it to me so badly? Layla asked. Logan then gave a command to his little spiders to alter the video. The blur from the person's head was removed, and now curly hair with a pale skin could be seen. It was still hard to see the student, but for those who were around him a lot, she could tell who it was. It was Quinn. What the hell is he doing? She asked. The video had already spread around, and it looked like many in the room were already talking about it. The feat itself wasn't so impressive, but the fact that a student of their age was able to do such a thing was. In the game, no abilities could be used, and some were even beginning to think the person in the video must have had some type of speed ability. However, gaming systems usually had some countermeasure against abilities being used in this type of place, and this was no exception. Due to the event not allowing the use of abilities, trackers, and such were invented to see when MC cells were activated in a specific area. It was the same type of technology that was used in the watches. Although the game couldn't stop the use of abilities, it could detect if someone was using it or not. The video had clearly come from someone who had full control of the video system that day. It would be silly for them to upload a fake video, but not impossible. Right now, Layla wanted to confront Quinn and have a go at him, trying to think about just what was going through his head at the time. But it was impossible. "Don't worry about it so much," Logan said. "I just wanted to make you aware. I plan to lose my matches as soon as possible and try to help out Quinn when I am above." The video blurs out his face, but anyone interested enough would be able to do what I did. Not that I think they could tell it was him, but I think we should be prepared just in case. Layla nodded in response, and the two of them parted ways as Logan went off to the training area in his section. What Logan had said had reminded Layla of her own task that had been given. She, too, was meant to lose the match as quickly as possible. With a lot on her mind, she took out her beast bow and placed an arrow in from her quiver that was attached down the side of her leg. There were multiple targets, all different distances away. They would continually pop up and pop down at random intervals, making it hard for one to get the pattern. Letting go of the arrow, it flew out quite fast. Just as the arrow was about to hit one of the targets, she held it in place with her ability. When the target popped back up again, she allowed it to go forward and hit. The event Layla wasn't allowed her to use her abilities. She didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing considering how weak her abilities were. If it were an event like this one where the goal was just to hit the targets, then she would do pretty well. Or at least not horribly. The students were told what they needed and what they were allowed to bring, but the finer details would only be revealed once the event started. This way, none of the students were able to prepare an unfair advantage beforehand. Layla continued to hit targets in this fashion. She didn't do anything fancy and just hit them slowly one by one. She just wanted to do a repetitive task to focus and clear her mind right now. One of the arrows had left and was floating about. She held the arrow still in place once again, waiting for the target to pop up and hit it. But when the target popped up again, another object went flying past her arrow, hitting the target before she could even do anything. "Sorry, I didn't realize you were after that one," a girl said. As she turned her head, she saw a long-legged, straight, blonde-haired girl standing by her side. She too had a bow in her hand, although it looked a lot more impressive than hers, perhaps at the advanced tier. Next to her were two more students, a boy and a girl who looked like a pair of brother and sister. They both had the same short hair parted off to the side. If it weren't for the fact that one of them had big melons in a particular area, she would have found it impossible to tell apart. The girl had what looked like a giant version of a slingshot on her back. In contrast, the boy had several small tomahawks. Layla decided to ignore what had just happened and continued doing what she was doing. Once again, she fired her arrow, hitting some targets. Then when she needed to hold the arrow in place to wait for the target again, the same thing had happened. Another object pierced the target she was about to hit. This time, laughter from her side could be heard, and it was from the same group of people again. This annoyed Layla, but she knew it was best to be the bigger person and moved over a little to a different part of the targeting section. When she fired her arrow again, before it could even reach the target, something came out from the side, knocking her arrow and snapping it in half. Still, she knew she was the bigger. "What the hell are you guys doing?" She snapped at them. "I'm sorry," the girl at front said. "It's just your arrows were moving so slowly we thought they were targets to hit as well." Annoyed by her words, Layla readied her bow and this time placed 3 arrows inside, shooting them at 3 different targets at the same time. The female quickly followed with the same and shot 3 arrows after Layla's. The speed of the arrows was far greater than hers and knew they would soon catch up. She was expecting this after seeing the weapon being used was better than hers. She decided to use her ability to throw the arrows off course. "Serves you right, cocky bye." But just as she was about to finish her thought, the arrows from behind also moved direction, changing the path, and had hit them, causing them to fall to the ground. The women started to walk over to Layla. "It makes me sick to think someone has the same ability as me, yet is at such a low level and has come to participate in the same event as me," the girl said. "If people were to see your poor skills with the bow, they'll start to think my ability is useless, making it harder for me in the future. Let me give you a piece of advice. Just drop out of the event. Don't fire a single arrow and give up. Even if you tried, you would come in last place anyway. Layla wanted to say something back, but the girl had already started walking away, and for some reason, the sick feeling in Layla's stomach was felt once again. It felt like recently everyone was telling her to give up on the event. Is it because everyone thinks I'll lose even before trying? She thought. Layla wasn't as weak as she thought. Although her ability was level 2, her fighting sense was at a high level. In some cases, she would fare well facing against level 3 or 4 students as long as they didn't have high-level beast gear on. But as she started hanging around with the others, she began to feel useless. And even now, others who had never met her before assumed her as useless baggage, and even the organization she was in. Instead of informing her of the plan they had, or giving her a critical mission, they were literally telling her to hide and run away. Prove them wrong. A deep voice said from behind. When she turned around, she could see a reasonably bulky, square-headed man. It was someone she had never met before and wasn't in her event, so she was wondering just what he was doing here. The best way to shove it in people's faces like them is to prove them wrong. And when you see their faces after, treasure that moment because that's the best feeling. The student said with a sadistic smile on his face. It looked like he had the experience of doing this himself at some point. The important thing was, though, that Leia thought what this student was saying was right. Screw them all, she thought. So what if everyone thought she was going to fail in the tournament? The only thing she could do now was to prove them wrong. All she wanted to do now was at least pass the first round of events. She would show them and everyone watching from wherever they were hiding. Thanks for cheering me up, she said, trying to guess the student's name. She had the urge to call the boy Blocky based on his appearance, but felt it was a bit rude after he had been so nice to her. The name's Nate, he said, helping her before she crushed his feelings. Actually, I was wondering if you could help me. You don't know a student by the name of Larry Steele, do you? He asked. It looks like she had no clue who Larry Steele was after all, Nate said as he continued to look around the room. Nate was hoping that perhaps someone as skilled as the Blood Evolver would be well known, to the point where if he went around asking others from the same military school, they would have instantly recognized the name. This was why he continued to go about asking students from other military factions if they knew of the person named Larry. So far, there was no success. Out of all the students who were preparing for their events, the students taking part in the fighting tournament were the most cautious. Everyone that was trying their best to hide their abilities and instead was doing some other form of training. This was because, if one knew the other person's ability before fighting them, it would be a big advantage. With nothing else to do, all Nate could do was wait for the first round of the tournament. Then no one would be able to hide their abilities anymore. Hey, Larry, how you doing, bro? A student's voice from behind was heard. Instantly, Nate turned around hearing the name Larry. A medium-sized male student stood behind him, and looking at his uniform, he could tell he was a first-year student. This has to be him, Nate thought. Inching his way closer, Nate started to perform some lunges near the area. He did this so he wouldn't look so suspicious when coming towards the group of people, and it also made sense since he was in the fighting tournament. The two students, Larry and his friend, were busy talking away when from the corner of their eyes, they could see what looked like to them an idiot performing lunges. It was clear that for whatever reason, the person was trying to get closer to them. Can I help you? Larry asked, not being able to take the awkwardness anymore. He felt embarrassed for the student. Oh, don't mind me. I'm just warming up for the fighting tournament, Nate replied, after switching legs and lunging his way closer to them again. Ignoring the strange man, the group started to move away. It looked like his plan had failed. Seeing that his brilliant idea didn't work, he decided to just continue practicing while looking at the two students. The two of them started to practice together, sparring, performing kicks and punches. It didn't look bad, but it didn't look impressive either. So you're hiding your skills here, said Nate. Don't worry. When you go up against me, you can use your full strength. No, I'll make you use your full strength. Nate then started laughing to himself loudly as he thought of the upcoming fight. A rematch between him and the Blood Evolver. *******. It was morning and Quinn had trouble sleeping through the night. Every hour or so he would be woken up by the dreaded pain as his health continued to go down. 2195 HP. It was important to keep this going for now as he needed to curb the addiction away. Sooner was better than later, and then he would be able to get stronger once again using the different types of blood. The event was the perfect time to do this, as there were far too many people all over the place for him to do anything in secret anyway. Before leaving the room, Quinn had placed his newly obtained armor into his dimensional space. After he decided to test out everything was working as it should have done and used his skill Shadow Equip, the boots, the chest piece, and his gauntlets all appeared at once. Status: Level 18. U10 750 25, 600 EXP. 21 and 95 HP. Strength 23, plus 7. Agility 26, plus 5. Stamina 19, plus 1. Charm 24, plus 1. Defense 27. As the item description said, the chest piece added a stat point to each one of his different stats and also increased his defense. It was a shame that none of the equipment he had also came with an active skill like the boots. However, he knew this was rare and hard to come by. There was still a lot of EXP to be obtained before reaching level 20, the next step for Quinn in his vampire evolution. It would be difficult now since there were no more planned expeditions for the year to other portal planets. This was the easy way for Quinn to gain experience by defeating beasts for the first time. If he was to fight some strong opponents in the tournament though, perhaps it would have helped him. But he knew that was near impossible. Quinn was still registered as the substitute, but it felt like something in name only. It was unlikely Peter would be able to escape from whatever they had planned. He also looked at his inventory where the intermediate crystal could be seen. It was just the item he needed to create a short sword from the shop. When he got back, he planned to craft the gear and hand it over to Vorden. It was a good weapon but wasn't quite compatible with him using his blood skills, such as Hammer Strike or Blood Spray. He also thought it would be good for Vorden to have a weapon for himself, just in case he didn't have a good ability on hand to use. To the left of his bed on top of the drawer was a little pamphlet. It continued the schedule of events for the day and what was being shown where. There was around an hour left before the first set of events had started and Quinn was wondering which one he should go to. After looking at the long list, apart from the 3 main events, none of them seemed too interesting for him. While scrolling through the list, he managed to spot one called Block. He seemed to remember that the game he had participated in yesterday was called the same thing. Is it an event to do with the game yesterday? He recalled playing and seemed to have quite some fun with the machine. Perhaps it was something he could enjoy watching before the main events. Knock. Hey Quinn, move your ass, let's go. Fex shouted through the door. Putting his equipment back into the dimensional space, he took the pamphlet with him and answered the door. Hey, where's Vorden? Quinn asked. I don't know, I came to get you first, Fex replied. When looking down the hallway, they spotted Vorden coming towards them. Sorry about that. I had some things to deal with, he said, smiling. Any ideas on what you want to go see? Fex asked. I was thinking about this. Quinn pointed to the block event, and the others were fine with it. Just like him, they were not really interested in anything apart from the main events anyway. When the 3 boys left the hotel, the outside area was vastly different from before. It was a nice sunny day and the sky was blue with hardly any colors inside. It was the perfect day to have an event like this on. Seeing the sun, though, gave Quinn the chills. The ring protected him now from the sunlight's effects, but it was as if his mind naturally started to react to the fact the sun was so bright. Maybe a placebo effect, that the sun still affected him in some way. On the top platform, it was filled with both students and members of the public, unlike yesterday. Nearly all the stalls were busy and people looked to be having a good time playing games and eating food and such. I almost forgot that it wasn't just the military watching this event. When Fex said these words, he realized something. This might also be the perfect time for them to send someone after him. He knew how good their information gathering was and they should have known where he was by now. In a way, being at the military base where no one knew where they were was a good hideout for Fex. But a place like this where it was open to the public, it was only a matter of time before he would be taken back. He looked at Quinn and Vorden walked off into the crowd of people, heading towards the events. I might have to say goodbye to you soon. he mumbled as he quickly followed after the two. Walking around on top of the arena was a bit harder compared to the other day. It was now fully filled and bustling like a city center with a sale on the weekend. A big event that attracts people from all over, Vorden said. Luckily, the platform was quite large and wide, allowing plenty of space for the vast amounts of people to move around. At the moment, most of the people were gathered around the screens that were stationed ever so often along the circular path. They were now toned on and were displaying the starter events for the day. The block event that the group wanted to go to was stationed on screen 7. While walking by, they managed to catch a few events on the other screens. On one of the screens, there was a soccer match going on that allowed the use of specific abilities. There were complicated rules for which abilities were allowed and not allowed for this event. It seemed quite hectic and was hard to follow along, but after the introduction of ability soccer, normal soccer just seemed boring to watch. The next screen they passed, there were giant pillars as tall as a house. The students were told to use their abilities and craft the most beautiful object they knew of. And there were even more going on. It was such a joyous day, and the atmosphere around them was great. Usually, on a day-to-day basis, Quinn would have someone throw an insult or slur towards him, but everyone was far too focused even to notice him or the others there. He felt guilty that he wouldn't be able to enjoy the events that were going on, for he had Peter on the back of his mind. Even if he knew why they decided to do this to Peter, he still didn't know what they would do after, nor could he do anything. He wasn't able to get strong enough in time and hoped that after using Peter as bait like Logan thought they would allow Peter to live at school a bit longer before moving him onto trial. In that time frame, Quinn would try to get as strong as possible and save him. Eventually, they had finally reached screen 7, and there was already a large crowd in this section. In fact, it was the largest crowd compared to all the other screens. At first, it was mostly filled with just students, but later on, adults and others from different factions came to take a look since they too were wondering why the event was so popular. I didn't know Block was such a popular game, Quinn said. It isn't, Vorden replied. I never expected there to be this many people. The group walked through some of the people who were at the back, not paying attention until they eventually found some seats around the middle area. There were seats for those who wanted to stay and watch the event permanently in front of every screen. There were then standing areas towards the back and sides for those who might want to continue to walk around and see the other events. Most people preferred to stand. That way, they could go to the stands or watch the other events and come back to the ones they enjoyed first. But because Quinn and the others didn't want to watch anything else, they were happy just to sit down. Sorry, Quinn said as they passed a man that they didn't have any military uniform on and sat in the 3 seats next to him. The man was sitting at the very end of the row. After sitting down and watching the event for a while, they realized how boring a game it was to watch rather than play. The game was currently at level 3, and they needed to witness multiple students to do the same thing again and again, clearing the same level. It wasn't an exciting atmosphere like last night, and there were even a few in the crowd starting to yawn. I think we might have made the wrong decision to trust you to pick the event, Fex said, yawning himself and stretching his arms. I'll go get us some drinks and snacks. You guys can wait here, Vorden said as he left his seat. Don't worry, the man sitting next to them said as he brushed his long hair that went down to his collarbone away and placed them behind his ears. Although the beginning is a bore, this type of game gets better in the later rounds, he said with a smile. When looking at the man, he had beautiful clear skin and didn't look a lot older than 20. Both Fex and Quinn didn't know what to say, so they just smiled back at the man and carried on watching the event. What he said was true, Quinn thought. The later rounds would be far more exciting, and he would love to see others perform at a level beyond 5. As the levels went up, more students started to get knocked out. It didn't seem like it was because they couldn't do it, but instead was due to the event's nerves and pressure. They had made silly mistakes at crucial times. The atmosphere was still tame. However, that all seemed to change when they had announced they would start to move on to level 4. The audience members seemed to perk up and started chatting heavily among themselves. Is there something big that happens when it reaches level 4? Fex asked. Not that I can remember when we played yesterday. It was the same right, even up till level 5. It just got faster, and the attack patterns changed slightly, Quinn replied. The man sitting next to them had overheard their conversation. Oh, so you managed to bet the game at level 5. I might say that's quite impressive. What's your top level? The man asked. I don't know, Quinn replied. We stopped playing after level 5. We were only playing because of a bet anyway. Vorden soon returned with the drinks and snacks, and by now, a few students had already passed and were knocked out by the level 4 machine. Then when the next participant started, he did something that seemed odd. Instead of blocking the attacks, it looked like he was trying to hit the machine as soon as it moved. The students had gone wild after seeing this. Is it him? So he was at the event after all. A student shouted. But soon after, he had made a mistake and had hit the machine before it even moved. Fake! Another shouted. I guess he couldn't be in the tournament, especially if he were in the video. It happened here on the top floor. Remember? Another said. Quinn and Fex, with their hearing, were able to overhear the students talking. When hearing what they were saying, they looked at each other, unsure about what was happening. They didn't say a word but had a dreadful feeling in the back of their minds. The game continued with several other students attempting to do the same thing. They were hitting the machine as soon as it moved to make it look as if it was standing still. In the end, not a single student was able to achieve it, and even the favorite to win the competition was knocked out. The man who was sitting by their side was finding the whole thing strange. He had watched the event multiple times in the past years, but had never seen anything like this happen. Nor the level of excitement coming from the other students, nor the strategy the participants were using. Can I ask? The man said to the student sitting in front of him. Why are they all attempting to attack the machine like that? Why not just play the game like normal? You mean you haven't seen the video? The student replied back. My guess is the contestants saw the same thing we all did. There's a video of someone playing the game at level 4, who was able to attack the machine before it even moved. He managed to clear the level perfectly, not making a single mistake while doing this. The sound of something hitting the floor and then ice spilling all over the place was heard. When the man turned around, he noticed that the student sitting by his side had dropped his drink. What the hell? How do they know about the video? Quinn thought. The level 4 event had ended, and since there were now very few participants, the events team needed to do something to fill the time. They decided that they would interview the favorites to win the event. It was quite a shock since most of the participants had been knocked out earlier than planned. On screen, one of the students was being interviewed who went by the name of Kyle. He was the favorite to win the event, but had attempted to do the strange actions and was knocked out in the process. Kyle, we just wanted to ask, what made you change tactics like that? We saw many here today attempt the same thing you did today, but it seemed like a risky move that didn't pay off. The female interview asked, This game has become too easy in the past. I knew that if I played usually, I would have had a high chance of winning. But what's the point when most likely the best person in this game isn't even participating? After seeing someone do what seemed like an impossible task, I decided I would try to challenge him in my own way. The plan was to emulate what this person had done in a video I saw today. If I achieved that at level 4, I would try to do the same at level 5 and send out a challenge to him. It turns out after attempting and failing at a level 4, I respect this student even more. The screen then went back to the interview, who had a few more words to say. For those of you unaware, the video Kyle was talking about was uploaded last night. It had become an overnight sensation due to the timing of things and how it was filmed and done only a day before this very event and at this exact place. The video will be played on the screen now for you all to see. The screen changed once again, and now full on the big screen in front of everyone. The video of Quinn in the gaming booth was then shown. His face was blurred out, but the others, even though it was their first time seeing it, they could clearly tell it was Quinn. The three boys continued to watch the video, which was being played on the huge screen in disbelief. For some reason, that 1-minute video felt like a 3-hour-long movie. All Quinn wanted to do now was run up there and shut it off and erase everyone's memory. Hey, Quinn, isn't that? Fex immediately had his hand grabbed over by Vorden and Quinn, who were standing by his side. The two boys then quickly dragged Fex out of the seats as they disappeared out of the crowd. Fex, are you crazy? Vorden shouted in a soft but angry voice, knowing that there could still be others around. The video had now finally stopped playing, and the interviews carried on with other participants who had attempted the same method. No one knows it's Quinn, and you were just about to reveal to everyone it was him. The video blurred out Quinn's head, making him unrecognizable. The only thing that could be seen was a blurred person wearing the school uniform. However, Vorden was concerned about whether someone could deblur the video. Would they be able to see the face or not? Unfortunately, Vorden wasn't the right person for things like this, and he wished he could speak to Logan right now and dim his curiosity. Annoyed that he was suddenly dragged away, Fex stepped back a bit and brushed away some of the crumbs of food that had fallen all over him in a rush. What did you say? No one knows it was him, right? Well, I wouldn't be so sure about that one, because there were 5 other people with us at the time who do know it was him. Fex said, I don't think that's a problem, Quinn replied. This video seemed to have already spread, right? If they wanted to, they could have already told everyone. In a normal case, someone would be happy for this to happen. Perhaps there are already people coming forward, even claiming that they were the ones in the video. Zach probably thinks I will do the same, and when I do try to discredit it and ruin my big moment. Still, just to be safe, I think we should go looking for them and try to clear their memories a bit. Fex suggested, let's split and search for them. We should have done this yesterday, but I didn't think such a small thing like this would become a big deal. Damn it, all we did was play a freaking game. The boys agreed it was always better to be safe than sorry, and even if Quinn was right about his thoughts, there was a chance one could change their mind later on, and this small mistake may bring up huge trouble for them. It's best if we split up. We can cover more ground then and find them faster. Use the watch to send a message as soon as you see them. Vorden said. The 3 boys quickly split and headed off into different sections as they searched for Zach and the others. While this was all happening, the strange man that was seated next to them couldn't help but find all of their actions odd. Everything changed as soon as the video started to play. He noticed. Was one of them in the video? The man thought. Otherwise, it didn't make sense based on the actions and what they were currently doing now. What an interesting bunch of kids, he thought as he chuckled to himself. Just then, another older-looking man approached him from the side. He wore regular plain clothing that didn't make him stand out much. When gaining access to the area, the public, including the students who weren't participating in any events, were told to hand over all of their beast equipment or leave them behind. So, the main events will start soon. They instructed me to bring you and the others to an appropriate place as soon as possible. The old man said, bowing down, just when I thought I found something more fun to do. The man said as the 2 of them walked off. Vorden was running about pretty recklessly. Unlike yesterday, there were far too many people to check to see if they could find them. Other than Zach, many of them had pretty unmemorable faces as well. The first area Vorden decided to check where each of the screens nearby. At least then, he would be able to get someplace high and see from the top if he could spot anyone. Looking around, Vorden was trying to see if there was anywhere high he could get a clear view from. Need any help? A voice called over. Sam. Vorden replied as he turned around. The 2 boys quickly started exchanging information, and Vorden explained what was going on and the reason for the worried look on his face. Actually, I already saw the video as well. Sam replied, and you're in luck. You don't have to worry about those guys. Let me explain. Early in the day, Sam had decided to pay a visit to the gaming center and wanted to talk to the admin man who had uploaded the video. There was no one else who had access to that footage, or at least not that part on that particular day. When he had arrived, Zach and his group were already there trying to get the original video file from the man. After listening in for a while, it turned out after the video was a big hit, the group tried to get video proof of what the person looked like or their name. It turns out they had already attempted to reveal to the people who the blurred figure was, but with no name and only the description of curly hair, it was hard for them to believe. In the video, one couldn't even see if the person had curly hair. It went a step further when they mentioned the student had a level 1 ability level on his wristwatch. They thought this would have been a standout feature. Instead, to others, it just became a big lie that was unbelievable. In the end, people completely ignored them. After that incident, they were embarrassed to tell others who they thought it was, so instead, they wanted to get the original video file. However, The man in charge was determined not to give access to the video to anyone and even claimed the file had already been deleted and rewritten over. Now it was impossible to recover. The man only wanted to share the incredible feat, but didn't want the pressure to be put on the student. If Quinn himself were to come here and ask for the original video, he would have given it to him on the spot. With nothing else to do, the group eventually left the place in disappointment. That's when Sam noticed the main culprit from yesterday wasn't there, Zach. The students were coming towards Sam, so he decided to hide himself and pretend he was doing something else and tried to listen to their conversation. I can't believe Zach wouldn't come with us, that wimp. I thought he was better than that. I'm telling you, man, after yesterday, he just said he doesn't want any business with that fellow. It's like he was traumatized or something, the students said as they walked past him. After learning about this incident, Vorden's heart started to calm down a little. It was too much sometimes to keep this many secrets in this small group. His own was enough. Knowing that everything was okay, Vorden decided to send a message to both Quinn and Fex to explain the situation. At the same time, Quinn had received the ping he had just found Zach. Using his hearing and a keen sense of smell, he was eventually able to locate him from yesterday. When there were large crowds of people, all he needed to do was repeatedly use his inspect skill until he found the right person. As soon as Zach's eyes met up with Quinn's, he gulped, remembering that strange feeling when he couldn't control his body. He didn't move or run away and just followed Quinn off to the side. When the two of them reached the edge of the arena, Zach constantly looked over at the railing. Thoughts ran through his head of the possibilities this crazy person might have done. He even assumed that his ability might have been mind control. If he could control his body and tell him to stand still, maybe he could also make his death look like a suicide. I promise I haven't told anyone, and I won't. I don't even know your name or what military school you're from. From others, I heard no one believed them either, and even they know nothing about you. Zach said quickly. Quinn hadn't even asked anything or used his influence skill and had already gotten all the information he needed. Why couldn't everything be this easy? He thought. Standing in the middle of the pathway was Fex. He was unmoving, and his watch was continually blinking, informing he had a message that Vorden had just sent. Multiple people walked past and around him, but his eyes were staring dead ahead, and he didn't even blink for a second. A few meters away, another figure stood there still. I finally found you, brother. Out on the busy platform, things were starting to settle down a bit. The public who had been invited to watch the starter events were being moved out to their seats in the arena. This was because the first main event for the day was about to start soon. With fewer people on the top platform, it was now easier to move and find people. Quinn had quickly met up with Vorden and was surprised to see Sam there with him. They both started to explain the details of what had happened over at the VR Gaming Center in the morning. After hearing everything was okay, he felt like he could finally relax. Hey, where's Fex? Did you send out a message to him too? Quinn asked. I did, Vorden replied. I sent one out the same time as I sent one to you, telling him our location and everything. I wonder why he isn't here yet. The first main event will start in around 15 minutes. A speaker sounded informing all of the students as well as the public to get ready for the first main event. We'll head back to the screen near our hotel. Just send him another message to meet us there, Quinn said. Wait, aren't you worried about him? Sam asked. What if another group like yesterday approaches him? Sam was a little concerned after what had happened yesterday. He wasn't ignorant of the behavior and actions treated towards low levels. He seemed to remember yesterday that not only Quinn but Fex was a level 1 user as well. If another group of people were to approach him, it could be bad news again without his friends around. Don't worry about him. I can't imagine anyone scaring away that guy, Quinn replied. The group, including Sam, had decided to watch the main event together. Although Sam's hotel was quite far away from theirs, he didn't mind the walk back in the evening. If he were to go back and watch it near his hotel screen, he wouldn't have anyone to watch it with anyway. At least not until Nate was knocked out of the competition, and he couldn't imagine that happening on the first day. When arriving at the screen, things looked a little different to when the events were played earlier on in the day. The screen had moved outward and looked like they were all hovering in the air above the arena. It allowed students to look over the edge and either watch the event from up high in the actual area or see sufficient detail on the screen. Several drones were flying about in the arena, each with a camera attached. It would be used to record as much detail of the events as possible. Most students would decide to watch it via the screen, but it was still nice to see what the real thing looked like from above. The boys decided that they would peek over to see what the first stage of the main event was like. Everything that was out before had been cleared, and right now there were a total of 140 small little raised platforms out. On the platform was a workbench of some sort with several other items and even a hot furnace behind them. While the others had their eyes glued on the stage, Quinn and both Vorden noticed something else. Inside the arena, there was one section of seats that had been cleared out, and in its place was a very large, luxurious booth. There was see-through glass allowing all the others to see what was inside. Inside the booth were 5 relatively large grand chairs inside. There were also already several soldiers standing at each side of the room, still like a statue. All of them wore the same beast gear that looked to be of very high quality. It was a standout because not many people in the arena had such beast gear on, as they weren't allowed due to safety precautions. It was natural for not only Quinn, but for those around to pay attention to the booth, and he had a pretty good feeling he knew who those seats were reserved for. Then it looked like the first person had arrived in the special booth. The soldiers in the room didn't bow down like they usually would when greeting a guest of high honor. Instead, they immediately went down on one knee and placed their fist on the ground. As soon as Quinn saw the person, there was no need for an introduction. There probably wasn't a single person who didn't know of this man. He continued to walk past the others, his heavy boots hitting the ground. He looked through the clear glass and adjusted his red-tinted sunglasses. Finally, as he sat down in the middle seat of the 5, his whole face could be seen. On his chin was a little patch of facial hair, and on the top of his head was a full mop of hair that had streaks of gray going through. It was hard to tell if it was dyed due to the pattern or whether it was just their old age. Once the man was comfortably sat in his seat, the other soldiers stood up in the room and saluted. "We welcome the Supreme Commander." The man sitting in the seat was the Supreme Commander Oscar White, one of the men hailed as a hero during the time of the Great War. When the war had started against the Dalki race, the enemy had done something unexpected. When the Dalki first arrived, it was clear they were under attack by a form of higher intelligence. They had better equipment and technology than humans. However, when the humans first saw the appearance of the Dalki, they looked strange and more like that of a wild animal mixed with a human. This caused the leaders at the time to be hesitant, thinking about whether or not these were the real enemy or not. In their naivety, they never expected the Dalki to pull off what they had done. While the main forces were in battle, at the start of the war the Dalki had chosen to assassinate each of the top countries' leaders around the world. This was to cause chaos and confusion amongst the humans. And for a short time, their plan had really worked. That was until the head of the Allied Earth Forces at the time had decided to take charge. The person's name was Oscar White. Later on, after the war, he had given himself the title of Supreme Commander and then appointed the 7 head generals of the other bases. Of course, not everyone agreed to this, and there was a disturbance of ability users running wild. It was later on that the big 3 families would be established, and further along the line True Dream would be added to make it the big 4. In the rose-like building that was seen whilst on the train, there was something called the Leaders' Table inside. Whenever a big decision was to be made, the Supreme Commander, the 7 head generals, and the big 4 would be called together. Seeing the first person to enter was the Supreme Commander, it looked like Quinn's guess of who the other 4 seats were for was spot on. "Will the others be arriving?" Oscar asked his personal aide on his right that stood by his side. It was a female who wore a fairly short skirt and round glasses with a ponytail. Rather than looking like she worked for the army, she looked like a security for a big tech company instead. "They should be here any second, sir." As she said that, the doors from behind opened wide and the 4 others entered after. The first person to enter was a large man who looked to be in his 50s, with a huge apple-like belly. His hair was a scruffy mess that went up into a triangle shape, and his nose was large and round as well. He went on to sit in one of the empty seats, and as he sat down, he gave a loud belching burp. As the air left his mouth, A stream of fire came out with it before quickly disappearing into the air. Bernie Sunshield, leader of one of the Big Four families, with the ability of fire, Sam said. The next to follow after him was a female, who seemed to be mostly dressed in black head to toe, and on the top of her head was a pointy hat. The hat was covering most of her facial features as there was also a veil attached. The only thing that could be seen through was her large smile and her purple dark hair. Not a word was spoken as she sat down in her seat as well. Mona Bree, the only female to be part of the Big Four and head of the Bree family. Their ability, beast tamers, Sam explained once again. Just behind her was someone who didn't need any introduction at all. Vorden and Quinn both saw the man's face. The blood around their body started to pump harder. Jack Truedream, Quinn said before Sam could introduce this man. The ability to steal others' abilities. The last person in the room surprised all three of them. Who? Wait, this isn't the leader of the Greylash family, Sam said confused as he saw the last person enter. Although Sam seemed to not recognize the man, Vorden and Quinn did, for it was the same person who sat by the side of them while watching the block event. If he wasn't one of the Big Four, then why was he there? All 5 of the seats were currently filled, but Sam was deeply confused, and it seemed like he wasn't the only one, as the others in the remaining seats also looked over at the remaining person sitting down. Whoever it was not one they were expecting. What's wrong? Quinn asked, still a little amazed that there was a good chance an important figure was sitting next to them for a while without them realizing it. Well, as you can see, the 5 seats are for the Big Four family members as well as the Supreme Commander. However, the leader that should be sitting in the last seat is from the Greylash family. The current leader is an older patient, respected man. This person looks like he just graduated from the military academy. It was true. Even before when Quinn had seen him, he felt the man was in his early 20s. That's why the idea that he held a high position never crossed his mind. Your information is a little outdated, Vorden said. I heard that the old man was sick for a long amount of time. There were even rumors that he had already passed away. But for fear of not having a new master, they decided to hide this information from the outside. If my guess is right, they can no longer hide it. The person you're looking at is the new master. What Vorden had said was very plausible in Sam's mind. The question was, Sam, who prided himself in being exceptionally knowledgeable in current world politics, had heard the same rumors. But it seemed Vorden was equally familiar, if not a little more. This strange group of people started to interest him more. And perhaps Quinn wasn't the only person to look out for. Inside the special booth, the room was quiet, and the others continued to look in the direction of the young man. They were waiting for him to say something, but he continued to play with his long hair, twirling it around his finger with his right hand. The others remained patient, hoping he would say something. But one person's head was furiously starting to shake, as he hated to be ignored, and it looked like hot steam was blowing out from his large nostrils. Rude. Are you not going to say something? Bernie shouted. You can tell we are all waiting for you, unless no one told you how to show respect. Oscar stood up in an attempt to try to defuse the situation. In a way, the military was a bridge between the 4 big families. It was hard because each power was considered an equal, and the same could even be said for them. I'm assuming the elder passed away then, and you are here as a step-in? Oscar asked. The young man finally turned his head, acknowledging the others in the room. He looked at each one carefully with his narrow, piercing eyes. It wasn't an everyday look one would give when looking at someone, and the others felt this as well. It was as if he was analyzing every one of them there. The others, sensing this, felt a little threatened, as if they were about to be attacked at any moment. And why would you assume I was only a step-in and not the actual new head? He asked. The large man started to chuckle. Huh. If the Greylashes were stupid enough to appoint such an arrogant young fool like you, then they must have really fallen. In a few years, the Greylashes might no longer be a part of the leader's table. The calm look on the man changed ever so slightly after hearing those words. He was no longer playing with his hair and instead pulled his fingers apart between his thumb and index finger. In between these 2 fingers, a faint blue light could be seen, and if one was to look even closer, little sparks were starting to go off. Those are fighting words. If you really want to test my abilities as the new head, We can put on a special exhibition show for everyone to see right here, right now. The young man said. Bernie, in response, stomped his foot in anger. As it hit the ground floor, flames shot up from his feet. It looked like small wings had appeared before quickly vanishing away into clouds of smoke. I'll burn you to a crisp right at this instant. The soldiers standing by watching were all frightened of what was to happen. Right now, it looked as if two of the strongest people on Earth were about to do battle. If they were to try to stop them, they couldn't do a thing. It was also a big reminder to everyone. These people in the room were not friends. If it wasn't for the fact that each of these people had a common enemy, the Dalki, there would still be a civil war between all 5 of them. Please, Oscar said. Today is an event for the future generation, for the kids to display their skills, not you two. If you wish to fight, then do it after we get rid of the Dalki. Oscar then walked over to the young man. In all honesty, he too didn't like how the young man was acting. Usually, he had a good read of people's strength, but it was nearly impossible to tell, which truly frightened him. I'm sorry for assuming you were only a stand-in. It was my mistake to say so. I will be the first to welcome the new leader of the Greylash family. Please name. Oscar asked. Owen Greylash, the new head of the family, the youngest and most powerful head to ever serve. When saying the last line, he looked past Oscar and directly at Bernie. Well, he's a confident leader. I'll give him that. Mona said. It's a good trait to have. Jack agreed. With everything having calmed down a little, they each sat adequately in their seats, and it was time for them to enjoy the event now. The speakers were turned on, and now all of the screens displayed what was happening in the center of the arena. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you had a wonderful day so far. There were many spectacular events, but as usual, we have saved the best till last. The first round of the 3 main events will now begin, and to start it all off, we have the wonderful crafting event. The camera then went on to show the materials of what was on each separate section. As you can see, each participant has been given the same materials. The only thing that is missing is the beast crystal. Once all participants are ready, they must try to figure out with their eyes alone what the best use for the beast crystal would be. Then our wonderful judges will decide which equipment is best. Each of the participants started to appear from underneath the arena and were now entering the ground floor. The participants had a number displayed on their watches, indicating which platform they needed to head off to. Hey, there's Logan, Quinn said, still looking over the edge. Number 33. Oh, you have a friend in this event then. I guess I'll keep an eye on him. Just then, Sam tried to squint over the edge where Quinn was looking, but they were too far up to be able to see anything. It just looked like a bunch of ants were down below. Without looking at the screen, there was no way he would be able to see what number any of the participants were wearing. You have some good eyesight, Sam said. Oh, thanks. Quinn replied nervously, to which Vorden gently stepped on his foot. It was a reminder to be careful since they were no longer alone. That's when he realized Fex still hadn't arrived and decided to send another message just in case. Now, let the tournament begin. The announcer said. Immediately, the students started to work away. The first step was to inspect the crystal. Crystals were quite versatile and could create several different weapons and armor, but certain patterns and shapes seen within the crystal could help decide what one would be best to be turned into. An example, a crystal from a turtle-like beast would usually best be used to make defensive equipment, perhaps even a shield. It could be turned into a weapon, but wouldn't be very useful. If one didn't know what beast it had come from, they would only be able to tell by inspecting the crystal. Once this step was complete, the crystal would need to be melted down to the appropriate temperature, depending on what was to be made. The next step after was deciding the mold and finally mixing the melted beast core with the required metals. Cheap or expensive metals could be used, but would affect the quality of the end result. The rest was down to the forger. Depending on the forger's level, the quality and strength of the weapon or armor would be decided. Most of the students had already finished inspecting the crystal and had moved on to the melting process. The camera continued to pan around to the many students working away hard. However, the camera eventually reached one student, a short little one who seemed to be just standing there with his eyes closed. It looked as if he was sleeping in the middle of the tournament. What is Logan doing? Quinn thought. Looks like he's asleep if you ask me. A voice said from behind. As the boys turned their heads, they could see Fex standing there. What took you so long? Quinn replied back. Quite some time had passed since Vorden had sent out his first message. No matter where Fex was, it shouldn't have taken him as long as it did for him to arrive. It wasn't as if the boys were joined by the hip, and they couldn't do anything themselves. But it was more like there was nothing else to do. The event was the only thing happening right now. Other than Quinn and them, Fex didn't get along with anyone else being a level 1. So he had no one else to watch the show with either. Hey, come on. Did you miss me that much? Fex said, looking at Vorden, who had a strange look on his face. He was still wondering about what could have taken him so long. Look, don't worry, I just did something that really upset my stomach yesterday and was in the toilet. Trust me, you don't want to go into the boys' toilet by screenfall. I think you can still smell it. Vorden looked at him even stranger now, and even Quinn was starting to feel slightly awkward, and it wasn't the bad jokes. Did vampires even get stomach aches? Vorden thought. By bad meal is he talking about blood? So I heard that you guys dealt with the Zack problem all okay, huh? Why don't you tell me about that? What happened with that? Fex's words when spoken were quick and to the point. He wasn't even giving enough time for the others to reply to what he had already said. Fex was acting really strange. He usually joked about a lot and often, but it felt as if he was trying to force himself this time. Quinn noticed this and a few other strange things straight away. As soon as Fex arrived, he was sweating. Vampires often didn't even sweat from strenuous activity as they had high amounts of stamina. This was different. This type of sweat was from something else, as if he was scared. The other thing that made Quinn think this was his heartbeat. The stronger a vampire was usually, the less their bodily organs needed to be used. Their heartbeats were able to be slowed, and the amount of blood and oxygen that needed to be carried around their body was lessened. So the fact that Quinn could hear that Fex had a fast heartbeat, he knew something was up. He wasn't in control of his emotions right now. Damn it, they know. Calm down, will you? Fex said to himself in anger, seeing that the others weren't buying his act. Hey, you said your friend's number 33, right? Sam called over. Well, it looks like he isn't doing too well. Their attention was focused on Fex this whole time that they had forgotten about the competition. When looking at the screen, the camera was once again focused on Logan, and still, he hadn't touched anything. Well, it looks like he doesn't care about the event then, said Vorden. You're probably right, Quinn replied. Hearing this, Sam was quite shocked. How could someone waste an opportunity like this on such a grand stage? Not only were the Big Four watching, but so were many factions from all over. A forger was highly sought after, so even if the one displayed a little bit of skill, they could quickly join a faction and live the rest of their lives peacefully. The two decided to question Fex later. Acting strange wasn't a call of emergency. It couldn't have been something urgent. Otherwise, Fex would have informed them immediately. They both trusted him now after the many times he had helped them out before. The timer continued to go down for the event until, eventually, the buzzer had sounded, signaling the end of the competition. Using his advanced eyesight, Quinn quickly looked down at all the items that had been made and used his inspect skill. It allowed him to see each item's stats clearly displayed out, as a screen hovered above each one. At first, Quinn was doing this individually, looking at an item, but then suddenly, a familiar sound was heard. Inspect skill has risen to level 3. The number of times he had used the skill while looking for Zack and now during the contest had helped greatly, and finally, it had risen to level 3. No one looking at the items, all of them immediately had a screen displaying their stats. There was no longer any need to use the inspect skill on each item individually. Seeing this, he could see the level of equipment made significantly varied. It seemed like they were only given a basic crystal to make an item. Some had chosen to make ranged weapons out of the crystal, some chose regular melee weapons, and a few decided on armor. It just went on to prove how difficult a forger's job was. The fact that not everyone had made the same item meant it wasn't easy to decide what the crystal would be best used for. However, when Quinn looked using his inspect skill, he could quite clearly see the ranged weapons and armor had an extra description, saying whatever stat the current weapon was, it would be halved. Some of the poorer made equipment only allowed an increase of 1 strength. With the 50% stat decrease, It practically meant the weapon was only a little better than using one's own fist. The melee weapon was the right choice, giving the user an extra 2 strength when being used. The perfect melee weapon that could be made from the item was a long sword. Whoever had made a long sword out of the items, it would give an additional 3 strength. There were very few long swords that had been made with the crystal. Then finally, there was a difference in the quality and skill of the forger. The ones that had made a long sword, each one of them looked quite different from another. Some just had a basic +3 in strength, and there was one with a +4. But in Quinn's eyes, there was a clear winner out of them all. For one of the students managed to make a sword with a +3 to the strength stat, but also it had an added weapon skill. The judges have made their decisions. First of all, students who made armor or ranged weapons. You have been knocked out of the competition. After this was said, about half of the contestants had left the stage, while the rest had passed. The weapons were then further inspected by the judges, but nothing was said as they had all passed anyway. Before the next event was to start, organizers interviewed 2 students. The first student was the one that had created the long sword with the added weapon skill. The audience members were a little confused about why he was chosen to be interviewed, as they weren't informed about who had made the best weapon. But Quinn knew why. Maybe if I don't become a traveler in the future, my skill could be used to become an inspector of beast weapons. Quinn thought. With just a single glance, he was able to tell a lot of information about a weapon. The next student who was to be interviewed was Logan, which came as a surprise to many. Logan, we just wanted to ask you a question. You were the only student to not make anything out of the materials presented today. Is there any reason for that? The female asked as she shoved a microphone directly to his face. I am not a forger but an inventor. I find making weapons quite tedious and boring, to be honest with you. I felt because I don't respect the art of forging like others, this was not my stage. Logan replied. From the side, a few of the forgers started to chuckle. Yeah, right. What a good excuse. More like he doesn't know how to forge a weapon. He would just have been embarrassed with whatever he had made. The student had said this quite loudly on purpose, trying to embarrass Logan. Logan then grabbed the mic closer to himself and faced the student. I assure you, creating something that would best the weapon in your hand would only take a few minutes. The interview had a huge smile on her face. She loved drama and entertainment, and it was moments like this the crowd loved as well. Very well. Would you like to redeem yourself? Logan, why don't we allow you to create a weapon now and a judge can come over and decide? Usually, Logan wouldn't have done something that placed him in the limelight so much. However, he hated it when others said that he couldn't do something when he could. It was as if they were calling him a liar. Very well. Logan walked back up to his section in the arena. All of the equipment was still untouched from before. The event organizers allowed this as usually there was quite a bit of setup time before events, and they would delay it with useless speeches or question and answer segments. This was far better than any of those. They had planned to give Logan the same amount of time as the other contestants, 30 minutes. However, Logan didn't need it. The forgers were allowed to use their abilities. Many of them had abilities that would help in the forging process, and Logan was no exception. The little spiders that covered his costume in a small suit started to break down and reform. They gathered on his back and then started to sprout out 3 individual arms on each side. When they finally finished forming, it looked like Logan himself was a giant spider. That's kind of cool, I'm not going to lie. Vorden said. The arms went to Wyke, and now with 8 of them, he was able to do multiple things at once. After 5 minutes had passed, he had finished creating a long sword. The crafting speed alone was enough to have the other impressed. They didn't even really care about the quality of the weapon. Still, the judges standing by the side could already tell while watching Logan make the weapon that it was one of decent quality. It wasn't the best weapon to be made today, but for the amount of time it had taken it was better than they had expected. The interview grabbed the long sword created by Logan and the one made by the heckler forger from the crowd. She lifted both in the air, and then struck them both against each other as hard as she could. We have a clear winner, she said. As she lifted the sword made by the heckler, the camera zoomed closely on the sword, and there was a reasonably large chip that went in around halfway into the side of the sword. When they turned to look at the one Logan had made, there was but only a small scratch. The crowd cheered in excitement, as they saw this. They loved someone who could back up his word. They were far too used to braggers who could never achieve what they said, and it seems like Logan was not one of them. Your friend is a strange one, Sam said. If he could do that all along, then why didn't he? Quinn started to laugh as he looked around at the other two, and then Logan down below. We're all a little strange, he replied with a smile, as the crafting event had ended and the judges were discussing what to do with Logan. They had wished for him to continue in the contest, hoping to see his skills once more. However, rules were rules, and they were not able to make an exception. Logan was disqualified and could now return to the others above. Deep underground, it was time for the next set of contestants to prepare themselves. Layla took in a deep breath. For now, it was time for the ranged event. Shortly after Huss, it was then Peter's turn as well. Fex, 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 can you hear me? Hello, Quinn said, waving his hand in front of Fex's eyes. Snapping out of his daze, Fex soon realized where he was. Oh, sorry. I was just thinking about how amazing Logan was, he replied. Quinn had called out Fex's several times, and the others had even left the area where they were watching the main event from. They soon realized that Fex's eyes were still glued to the arena floor. They were about to grab some snacks, yet for some reason, he hadn't followed. Hey, seriously, if something's on your mind, you can tell us. You know that, right? Quinn said. I still remember what you said when we were underground on that planet. We're now blood brothers, right? Hearing this from Quinn was meant to cheer him up, but instead, it seemed like it had only made him sadder. Before Fex had arrived and joined the others, he had a very uncomfortable confrontation with the last person he wanted to see. It was his sister, Silver. He knew that his family would send someone after him, perhaps even multiple people, but he had never expected them to send over Silver. His sister was known for upholding the vampire laws no matter what. She was strict and always completed the tasks given to her. The complete opposite of Fex. If it was anyone else, Fex felt like he could have probably convinced them to let him stay, or even run away, but not from Silver. She was far too powerful and would have never let him stay. On the platform where the two had seen each other, she slowly walked towards him, and he was frozen in place. Suddenly, thoughts of the others he had met during his time came into his mind, especially Quinn. If he was going to leave, he wanted the chance to at least say goodbye. When she finally reached where Fex was, she handed him the small silver flask. This is yours, right? Silver said. I found it with a bald-headed teacher. The person seemed quite strong. I thought you might have been dead. Fex looked at the flask, and knowing that the other one he had was still with Quinn, he knew this had to be his. Oh, it is mine. I thought I had lost it. You fool. Silver snapped. You know how important items like this are. If the family were to find out, then who knows what they would do to you. You've already broken so many rules. Don't go around breaking more, making your punishment worse. Fex didn't know what to say. It was hard to argue back, and he just stood there looking defeated. When Silver saw the sad look in his eyes, a slight pain was felt in her chest. It was true. Silver did care for the vampire rules above everything else. She always completed her mission and was strict on everyone around her. However, Fex didn't realize that she had a soft spot for one person in particular, and that was her little brother. I'm here to take you back, she said. He looked up at her, now with even more sadness in his eyes. He had spent only a couple of months on Earth, his dream place, and had only spent it at a school. The event was the first time he felt like he was actually doing something different, playing games and joking around with the others. I know, let's just go, he said, plodding his feet along as if they weighed 100 kilos. He walked slowly towards her. I still have some unfinished business here, and I can't just take you or leave in the middle of my duty as a teacher. If I was to leave now without telling them I was resigning, they would find it suspicious. I shall inform them after the event is over. You may stay until then. Also, during that time, you must clear the memory of those you have gotten close to. We shall alter your files and deal with your disappearance on our end, she explained. The expression started to change on Fex's face once again. He still had a few more days with the others, and now he at least had the chance to say goodbye. However, we shall meet daily. You will update me on what you are doing and where you are. I can't have you going off and disappearing again. She said. With everything said that she needed to, she started to walk off. Thank you, big sis, Fex shouted. You're the best. Although many couldn't see it, it would have been a race sight for many. A slight smile appeared on her face. Still, even though Fex could stay for a few days, he now had a lot on his mind. When he thought about it, maybe he was selfish, wanting to say goodbye. The quicker he had left with his sister, the less chance she had of finding out about Quinn. This was now a big worry on his mind. No matter what, he didn't want his sister to find out about him. Fex still didn't know the truth behind Quinn, but decided to leave it for now. If she were to find out, she would quite possibly insist that Quinn head back with the two of them. Then if they were to find out he had made Peter an illegal, unregistered vampire, it would be hard to stop any punishment he might receive. When Fex had returned to his friends, all these thoughts were filled in his mind. There was also a good chance that now Silver knew about him, that she would be closely watching him, so he didn't run away. Should I warn Quinn about my sister, or will it only make matters worse? As long as his sister didn't find out about Quinn, there was no need to worry about them. However, there was one thing he couldn't stop, and that was Peter taking part in the tournament. The second he started to fight, or she got close to him, she would be able to smell him. No matter what, she would find out about him, and Fex needed a plan. There was one chance he had, and that was when he would meet up with his sister every day. The four boys had finished getting their snacks and drinks and were just waiting for the next main event to start. This time, rather than watching the match from over the edge, they had decided to find some seats near the big screen. When looking around, they managed to spot someone who had a small crowd around them. Look, please, I just want to enjoy watching the next events. If you have anything else to ask, please just send me a message later. As soon as Logan spoke these words, he quickly handed over a contact card that contained his email and contact details. He was never really good at interacting with people, and the attention he was getting wasn't enjoyable at all. After a few adverse reactions, people started to understand and break away from him. You can finally join us then, Vorden said. The boys introduced Logan to Sam before deciding to have a sit-down together. They quickly discussed the video, and Logan confirmed to Vorden that even if they unblurred the video, it was hard to tell the one in the video was Quinn. With this whole matter settled, it felt like a weight was lifted from their shoulders. All apart from Fex, of course. So, how do you think Layla will do? Did she look okay? Quinn asked, concerned for his teammate. She seemed to be distracted with something else, Logan replied. When I informed her about your video, her mind was, let's say, busy. To be honest, I'm pretty sure she doesn't care for this tournament like us. Logan didn't need to explain why and couldn't due to Sam being there with them, but the boys knew what he meant. Due to her already being a member of Pew, there was no need for her to try hard. The event was about to start, and the screen displayed the field where it would take part. Compared to before, it looked like the arena was completely transformed. On the screen now, there was what looked like a little makeshift town. The town looked to be partly destroyed and looked more like ruins, but there were several areas that would allow students to use them as vantage points. Vorden was the first one to release the place had been built in a particular way made for ranged weapons users to take advantage of. I wonder how they managed to make something so fast. Quinn asked. Oh, that's simple, Logan replied. They just had a few Earth users come on stage and make it real quick. I saw them getting ready as I was heading out. The participants of the event entered the stage once more. All the ranged users entered with their beast weapons by their side, while also wearing a strange red-colored chest piece that seemed to cover their entire upper body. When looking at all the participants closely, not a single one of them wore any beast armor or boots. The only different thing was the weapons themselves. It seemed like each participant was also given different types of material to be used. For bow users, they were given all the same arrows, and the same for the other weapons as well. The ranged ammunition given to participants was designed to explode on impact and produce a paint-like splatter. Ladies and gentlemen, all the participants are now ready for the ranged event, so I will quickly explain the rules. Each person has been given a set amount of ammunition to be used for their ranged weapons. There is a safety period of 1 minute where participants will not be allowed to attack each other, and must enter the small makeshift town. If a participant does not follow this rule and chooses to attack, they will be disqualified. The aim is to hit others while not being hit yourselves. If any bit of paint touches the red marking on the participant's chest, a sound will indicate, showing they have been eliminated from the round. Students must quickly exit the field, and the red-colored chess piece will turn black, showing they are no longer active. After the first 40 students have been eliminated, the round will end. Scattered around and inside the building are several ammunition spots where the players may refill. Now that the rules have been fully explained, let's get this show on the road. The students were randomly split into 4 groups for this event. Each of them was to enter the small makeshift town from the north, south, east, and west entrances. The layout of the town was like a plus sign. There were several buildings and small alleyways, but larger pathways crossed each other in the center. Layla was at the north entrance, and by luck, it seemed like there were a few others that she recognized with her as well. The annoying blonde-haired girl along with a brother and sister pair. Just my luck to be put in the same group with them. She took in several deep breaths. For some reason, the nerves were getting the better of her. Usually, she was quite good at calming herself down in these types of situations. Her mother would always tell her that one would only get nervous if they actually cared about what they were about to do. Does that mean I actually care about then this lame event? In truth, she already knew the answer. I just have to get through the first round. If I can do that, it will prove I could actually do something on my own and I'm not just some burden on everyone. Layla said to herself, just don't get eliminated. Just don't get eliminated. You can do it, Layla. She carried on repeating these words to herself as if it was some chant. The more she said, the less likely it seemed to become a reality. Although she was going against Pugh's wishes, they hadn't even bothered to explain to her what they had planned to do, which had irritated Layla quite a bit. Going against their orders, she would at least have liked to pass the first round to prove to herself she could do it, and then she would immediately eliminate herself from the second round with no problem. One more day in the event couldn't hamper their plans too much, and wasn't even like they cared if she didn't. All right, and let the event begin. The buzzer had sounded, signaling the start of the event, and students from all 4 entrances had entered the small town. Above the arena, a holographic display of the countdown had begun. Some students had split off immediately from the group and went on to look for their hiding spots, while others already had a few targets in their minds. And Layla had a sneaking suspicion she had become one of those targets. Right on her back, out of the corner of her eye, she could see the blonde girl and brother and sister pair. Although this was a singles tournament, it looked like they knew each other beforehand and had decided to team up. While looking around, Layla noticed that this was a tactic that had already been implemented by many. A lot of people were running together in groups rather than singles. Did they decide this beforehand or just now? It was too risky for Layla, and she knew no one else in the competition. All her friends were on the outside, and if she teamed up with people now, how would she know if she could trust them? Hoping her suspicions were not right, Layla decided to stop going along the straight path and bolted in between 2 buildings down an alleyway. However, just like she had expected, the other 3 had followed her. Why? Why did you have to target me? What did I do? Is it cause I look weak? She said in anger as she gripped her bow. There were now only 15 seconds left on the timer before participants were allowed to hit each other and eliminate them. That's not fair, Quinn shouted at the screen, seeing that Layla had 3 people on her tail. Why are they grouping up on her? Quinn, you should know better than anyone that this world isn't fair. Not the way it is right now anyway. It's not against the rules, so let's hope she doesn't take this loss hard. Vorden replied. Loss? You can't count her out just yet, Fex said positively. She can still turn this around. Still, both Quinn and Vorden knew the reality. It was 3 against 1, and they were all also higher ability users. The only chance she had was to try to run into another group of people and hope the 2 of them fought it out, allowing one group to eliminate the other. But Layla wasn't even thinking about this tactic. She never thought of trying to use another group to get rid of the one on her trail. She was too focused on trying to figure out how to get rid of them all by herself. If she didn't, she would have felt even more useless. She finally decided to enter a small building and headed straight for the stairs. At least this way, she could face them down the stairway one by one as it was quite narrow. When she reached the top, she turned around the corner and waited. Asterisk beep asterisk. The sound of the buzzer had gone off, indicating once again that the students were now allowed to attack. Come on, I need to survive the first round, at least, and even if I don't, I'm taking one of you with me. She gently peeked around the corner, but there was no sound, not even footsteps could be heard or shuffling of any kind. Have they given up? She thought. Just to make sure, she fired an arrow and twisted it around the corner with her ability, hoping to hit anyone on the other end of the staircase. Asterisk ding asterisk. A little bell sound was heard, indicating that a player had been hit. A broad smile appeared on her face. When attempting to move, she looked down at herself and noticed that her red chest piece had turned black. She was the one who had been hit. Hello. A high-pitched voice from the right side said, sounding a little distant. When she looked outside, it seemed like the voice was coming from a glassless window on the other side of the room. She was on the second floor, and if one were to climb up from the side, they would have either made plenty of noise or exposed themselves to the many other students. Yet she had heard nothing. Popping her head outside of the window, she could see the blonde-haired girl being lifted by her other two colleagues with wings on their back. They were flapping backwards and forth, allowing them to pick up the girl to reach the window. As much as she wanted to shout out in anger at the girl, she couldn't. Layla had lost fair, and she hadn't even put up much of a fight. I'm sorry, Sam said, seeing that one of their friends had been eliminated. Not only that, but she was the very first student to be eliminated as well. Come on, Quinn said. There's no need to watch this anymore. Let's head back to the hotel, and we can try to cheer her up. He had hoped that Layla truly didn't care about the event. However, he felt like even if one didn't care, it would be pretty embarrassing to be the first one to be eliminated. In the past, she had helped him many times before, and without her, Quinn didn't know what his current situation would have been like. He wanted to be there for her right now. Being eliminated from the event, Layla left the field and was allowed to head back to her hotel rather than the underground slot. She had made sure to sign out and return the equipment given to her and proceeded to write her name down on a digital tablet. When she grabbed the pen, she was able to see that she was the first one to have written down her name, confirming she had returned the equipment. Quickly, a digital signature was placed and she walked off heavy-footed. She took the elevator that went directly to the top of the arena. It was a little walk from where she was, since the underground facility looped around and had several placed along the way. The elevator from the arena floor allowed one to go straight into the hotel lobby, as they expected some students to want to rest straight away or cool down before doing anything else. The ride up the elevator felt like it was taking forever to reach the top. When she had lost, she didn't know what emotion to feel. She had tried so hard, and the only thing she wanted to do was get past the first round. When finding out she was the first participant to be eliminated, it hit her even harder. I am useless, she said as tears started to roll down her cheeks. Everyone was right. Vorden, Pew, my mother, that girl. They all told me several times that there was no reason for me to be here. Erin, where are you? She cried, as the elevator made a ding, indicating it had reached the top floor. She made sure to quickly wipe her tears away with her sleeve for fear that there might be someone in the hotel lobby that would have spotted her. When the elevator doors opened, Layla took a step forward and was surprised to see a single student standing in the hotel lobby, not too far away from the elevator entrance. The purple hair covering her single eye and her face could be seen when she turned around. CIA. Layla called out. I've been waiting for you. Agent 100, CIA replied. When her eyes met with CIA's for a brief second, Layla was quite pleased to see someone was waiting for her. When Erin had disappeared and left them, it felt like she had no one to lean on, no one to confide in. Erin had been the strong figure that Layla wished she could be, and yet it was something she would never be able to achieve. However, when she disappeared, Layla was a little lost. She had Quinn, but after finding out she was with Pure, their bond was a little broken. There was also the fact that Vorden would constantly get in between the two and kept trying to fraction that relationship. In the middle of all these events that surrounded her, there was a little ray of hope, and that was CIA. After the last portal expedition, she had seen a scared little side to CIA during that time. She seemed afraid of Quinn and the others and was confiding in her due to that. Layla, when seeing this, was seeing a version of herself when she looked at Eren. In a way, it made her believe she needed to become a stronger figure to know that someone was relying on her instead of the other way around. This time, she would be a pillar of support for CIA. That was until the words spoken out of her mouth were like 1,000 knives had been stabbed right in her back. There was a straight look on the young woman's face. Her tone was serious. "I've been waiting for you, Agent 100, CIA greeted. There was now not a doubt in her mind. There were only two groups of people that knew her identity, Pew and Quinn's group. However, what Quinn's group didn't know was her agent number, and her ranking had recently just dropped as well. The fact that CIA knew this confirmed that she was part of Pew herself. I know you might be shocked, but it was all because of Agent 5, CIA explained. Agent 5. This meant CIA being close to her was all of her mother's doing. Suddenly a realization was coming into her head. From the very beginning, since she had entered the academy, CIA had been her roommate. They had specifically told Layla that she was the only agent that was sent to military base 2. Was everything a lie? Now she didn't know what to believe. Was he new friendship CIA fake? Was her acting scared was nothing but an act? What was worse was how much did she already know and how much were they reporting back to Pure? Her own mother hadn't trusted her to even complete a mission like this, that they had to send back up to look after her. When there was a bond of trust, it went two ways, but her whole life it had always been one-sided. She trusted her mother with the Pew's true intentions even though she had so many questions. She trusted her mother when going through her hellish training that she felt like was torture. She trusted her mother when she had told her life would be better in the future. Yet, she didn't trust Layla. After everything that had happened so far, something had snapped inside of Layla. Layla walked right past CIA, ignoring her. "Wait, what are you doing, Agent 100? CIA asked, a little shocked by Layla's actions. "Don't call me that, I'm not a number." She shouted back. "I have a name, and I have a pretty good one." At that moment, the automatic doors to the hotel lobby opened and in walked in Quinn and the other boys. They immediately could see her bloodshot red eyes, but had mistaken them for sadness instead of anger. "Are you okay, Layla? What's wrong?" Quinn said as he rushed over, placing his hand on her forehead, checking if she was all okay. "Idiot, why didn't you come sooner?" she said, "and your hand's cold." At this moment, the full waterworks had come out, as tears of waterfall started to fall and her head was now laying deep into Quinn's chest. "Hug her, dude," Fex whispered in his ear, while the other two boys pretend to look away and whistle. Not knowing what to do in this type of situation, he listened to Fex's advice and gave a strong and firm hug to Layla as he tried to calm her down. "Quinn," she cried, "I don't want to be useless anymore." "I don't." "Layla, when have I ever said you were useless?" Quinn replied. At this point, Vorden had decided to step away, knowing full well he had said that a few times. "You have done nothing but help me from day one," he replied back. Seeing the scene, CIA didn't know what to do. She had still not even finished explaining the details of the upcoming plan. Agent 5 had assigned her the task to look over Agent 100. No matter what was to happen, this was her only mission. But right now, she couldn't interrupt this scene. "Layla." She tried calling out. "Go away. Go away." She screamed. At this point, the others noticed that CIA was standing behind her. And seeing this strange reaction, Vorden started to wonder. He found it strange that Layla had broken down like this over the event. Sure, she would be upset, but was it really such a big deal? "Hey, she clearly doesn't like you being here. So just scram," Vorden said. "I can do what the hell I want." CIA snapped back. "You're not my boss, and you're not a teacher," she said as she continued to walk forward. "Just remember, I know about your secret, and yours," she said as she pointed at both Fex and Quinn. Sam, who was currently a bystander at this point, didn't have a clue what was happening and was finding it hard to follow along. "It's like I've been transported in the middle of a soap opera while still in the middle of the season," he thought. CIA continued to walk forward, not caring about anything. However, after a few steps, she suddenly could no longer move. Something seemed to be restricting her movements completely. Then a breath was felt behind her neck. "I would like to see you just try to tell anyone about that," Vorden said. In a sinister voice, it was the first time she had heard him speak like that. When trying to look down, she could see his hand pressed against her throat, with nothing but a chopstick pointed at it. Perhaps others would have laughed, but the deadly aura coming off from his words, she knew it was no laughing matter. Then, when looking ahead, she could see another person, who had his hand held out steady, with all his fingers pointed. "Now why would you choose to threaten us?" Fex said, when hearing the words she spoke. He felt like this was the worst time for anything to be revealed. If the humans had found out what he had transported into, not even his sister, Silver, would be able to save him. That's why the instant she had moved forward and made the threat, he had activated his strings to hold her in place. At the same time, he immediately saw Vorden in the move, and carefully made sure to allow the strings to not restrict any of his movements. However, Fex soon realized he didn't need to do much, as it seemed like Vorden was able to see and move away from the strings via his own accord. He's a skillful one. At this point, Layla had nearly stopped crying. Quinn still had her held in her hands. She pushed away slightly from his chest and looked up into his eyes. "Quinn, please, I don't want to go back to them," Layla said. "I want you to turn me. I want to stay with you. I want to be stronger." To Sam, it looked like Layla had just made some type of confession. Although it sounded weird based on everything that happened, it was the only thing he could think of. But Quinn very well knew what she meant. She wanted him to turn her like he did with Peter. He was very hesitant, especially after what had taken place with Peter so far. But what happened with him didn't mean the same would happen with everyone. After all, his own life had changed quite a bit, and Layla was in a troubling situation. He had already figured when she had said she didn't want to go back to them, that being with them was preferable than to Pure. Changing her meant she would be leaving Pew and going to his side. Leaving a big organization like that wasn't simple. One would need the power to fight back, and Layla didn't have that. "Very well," Quinn replied. Quinn placed both of his hands on top of Layla's shoulders and moved her off slightly to the side. Hearing Quinn agree to turn had made her overjoyed, and the sad emotion that filled her was starting to disappear. Perhaps this was the big change she needed in her life. "Thank you," she said as she sniffled a little bit and rubbed away the last few tears. Of course, right now wasn't the time to change Layla and go through the blood ritual. Even she knew that. They were in the middle of the event, and there was always the chance the same thing that happened to Peter could happen to her. It was best to wait until they were back at school, where Logan could access the black market in case she did turn into a gal. "Ladies and gentlemen, the fighting event will soon begin," the speakers announced. The sound of the crowd outside beginning to move was heard. The crowd cheered louder than before, and it could even be heard from the back of the hotel lobby where the group were at. This announcement and reaction made it clear it was the most anticipated event even out of the main three. "Nate," Sam said in a rush. "Sorry guys, I really got to go watch my friend. It looks like you guys got things handled here anyway." Although many things were happening in front of him, he hardly knew this group of people and was just helping them out for the time being. What he wanted to do now more than ever was go and support his true friend, Nate. "I'll come with you," Logan said, as he was equally concerned at what might happen to Peter, and one of them from Quinn's group needed to inform them of what was happening. The others didn't have to worry about too much with Sam. It just looked like some type of strange invitation, and nothing was ever mentioned about Quinn being a vampire or any sort. All that was revealed was Quinn and Fex had some type of secret. Seeing the level 1 on their wristwatch and how confident they were, he probably guessed it was something to do with the fact that they hid their abilities, yet were in the school on the basis of being weak. Of course, this was something he could report to the school if he wanted to, but he saw no reason to. Not being in the same military school, he would have no benefit from doing such a thing whatsoever, not that he would have even bothered in the first place. The two boys quickly left together and went ahead to the Screen 2 area, while the other three were left behind. However, after hearing the announcement, Fex was equally worried and wanted to leave as soon as possible. There was a good chance his sister would be watching the fight. Depending on how close she was to the arena, she would smell out Peter. Or there was even the chance of Peter revealing some of his powers, giving him away. The problem was he was the one holding CIA right now. You two can go as well, Quinn said. I can deal with her on my own. Both Vorden and Fex looked at each other from the other sides. It was the first time Quinn was requesting something like this. He would often ask for their advice in situations like this, so they found it a little strange. Did he already have a plan? Are you sure? Vorden asked, still keeping the chopstick he had in his hand close to CIA's throat. I'm sure. Quinn said, honestly, I haven't given up on Peter yet. I need you two to see if there's any way of saving him, any gaps in their routine if we can ship him off. I know it's unlikely, and even if we can't, at least find out what they plan to do to him, so we can get revenge later on. It was the first time they had heard Quinn declare that he had planned to go against the military in the open like this. Saving one's friend from them was different. He was now clearly saying if he couldn't save them at one point, he would punish those that did this. I like it, Vorden said with a smile. I agree, Fex said as he let the strings loosen and returned to him. Vorden quickly ran over, and the other two had left the hotel lobby as well. Quinn quickly looked at Layla and just gave a slight nod, indicating her to go off and follow the boys. Before leaving, she whispered something into Quinn's ear. CIA started to look around the room to see if there was any way out. The hotel lobby was quite large, and the area they were in was near the elevators around the corner from the reception. It was a good 20 meters before they could be in sight of anyone. She then looked up at the top right-hand corner, where a camera was present, but she also knew that was useless as well. There was a specific reason why CIA had chosen to meet Layla here. The camera here has been disabled already. In the security room, it would just show a loop, and also it was far enough from the reception area where no one could hear or see them. With no choice and the others gone, she felt she could only do one thing. A spirit spear formed in her hand, and she quickly threw it out towards Quinn. Straight after, she tried bolting it towards him, as she wished to run past him and head for the exit or at least the reception area. Moving to the side avoiding the first spear, Quinn then went ahead to CIA. Another spear was thrown, and this one had hit him directly in the stomach. Yes, she said, knowing full well that Quinn would have been slowed down, but it was useless. Quinn wasn't even using his full speed. Half a second later, he was already directly in front of her, and he quickly threw out his hand, grasping his fingers tightly around her neck. Even with the debuff, he now had far surpassed any regular human speed. As she looked into Quinn's eyes, she could see for some reason there was great anger. When the other two had left, she thought the most troublesome ones had gone. Instead, it looked like the worst one was left behind. He knew from the conversation earlier that she was Pew, and before Layla had left, she had told him not to worry about the cameras. What is Pew planning to do? Quinn asked, as if, I will tell you. She croaked out again. Why was it that she seemed to be getting strangled all the time by these psychos? She thought. However, what she was also surprised at was the fact that Quinn knew about Pew. Did Layla tell them everything? How much do they know? When she asked for him to turn her, what did she mean by that? To stay with Quinn, does this mean she's chosen to betray us? I must inform Agent 5 immediately. She started to stretch out her fingers to reach into her back pocket. Inside was a communication device. Maybe she wouldn't be able to talk out in the open, but if she were just able to turn it on, they would know something was up. No reply was a sign that an agent would be in trouble. Quinn's eyes started to glow even redder now, as he had activated the influence skill. You better hope this works this time. Otherwise, I have no choice but to get rid of you. Layla looked into Quinn's deep red eyes, and her body was frozen in place. She didn't know why. Please work, Quinn said. I don't want to kill again. Again. CIA heard, now fearing for her life. The four others had just arrived at Screen 2. They went ahead and sat down in the seats ready to watch the fighting event. It seemed like there was quite a bit of preparation work to be done, so thankfully, the fights hadn't started yet, and they were busy explaining the rules to the audience. Now, when looking out on the field, 10 slightly raised circular cylinders went up from the floor to as high as the first row of audience members, keeping them eye level who were watching from their seats. This allowed for nearly the perfect view for those sitting there. The flat-top surface of the cylinder would be the fighting platform for the participants. There were a few ways to lose in the fighting tournament. Your opponent would be knocked off the cylinder platform. One was to be knocked out, or the referee who would also be on the cylinder with them declared one of the students a winner. When looking out on all the cylinders, Fex could see his dear sister on one of the platforms. Of course, she had to be a referee. He said, underneath the arena, the contestants were all busy getting ready for the fighting event. The weapons and armor they had hidden until now were all out on full display. Even if one was to see what their opponent was wearing, there was too little time to try to come up with a countermeasure. On top of this, the participants themselves did not know who they were going to go up against. Students for this event were also able to use whatever equipment they owned. It didn't matter whether one person had higher gear than the other. It was all about individual strength rather than skill. The focus was to show how they would compete out in the real world. Above, there were 10 platforms, allowing for there to be 10 fights happening simultaneously at the same time. The fighting event was one of the most important and most significant events, so they needed not to have too much going on at the same time. Their goal was to allow the students to display their powers, and if all the students were to fight at the same time, it would be impossible to keep track of them all. Many factions and important members were watching this event, looking for their next recruits. Before going onto the stage, each of their stage names would be announced, allowing them to know who they were watching and something to remember the students by. All of the students who were in the fighting event were split into groups of 10. This meant on the first day, half of them would be eliminated. Nate continued to look around and eventually spotted Larry. Looks like we won't be facing each other in the first round. That's good. Let me see how much you have improved before I fight you myself. He said. It wasn't set in stone, but Nate was pretty sure that the groups had indicated who would be going out together, and those in the same group would be facing each other. When he looked over to the group to his right, he could see not only Larry but also the student who had the two guards who had never left his side once, standing at the back. I guess it's worth keeping an eye out on you as well, Nate said, still curious why they never left his side. We have something important to tell you. The guard whispered into Peter's ear. Don't even think about surrendering or giving up the fight. If you do, you will be paying a visit straight back to the dungeon. And trust me, I can guarantee you don't want to go back there this time. Even with the man's threats, it didn't bother Peter too much. What he was far more concerned about was what they were planning to do. Were they really going to just let him have a fair fight with one of the students here? It was clear now after spending a whole day with the guards. With Quinn and the others' strength, there was no way for them to save him. He wasn't stupid. Whatever they plan to do, I won't let them have it go their way. Peter thought, trying to make it as hard as possible. All right, everyone, Group A, please start to make your way to the platform. A soldier ordered, and the first group, which had both Peter and Larry, started to make their way up to the stage. Nate started to rub his hands together in excitement. He couldn't wait to see what would happen. Inside the underground arena, they also had several screens, which allowed them to see what was going on above. He would have to observe from there. The anticipation of finally meeting the Blood Evolver was killing him. They had all entered the field as the crowd heavily cheered for them. The noise was so loud it felt like the whole arena was vibrating slightly. Not everyone was here for recruitment, and it was clear some were here just to enjoy the show that would be put on. It looks like Peter will be in the first batch, Logan said, watching from the top platform in his seat. I wonder what they are thinking. Vorden asked. Rather than worry about what they are thinking, I'm far more concerned with what Peter is thinking. He is a little unpredictable when it comes to situations like these, Logan replied back. However, Fex was now sweating heavily. He crossed his arms and nervously tapped his foot away, staring at the screen. He was far more concerned about a bigger problem. Not being able to take it anymore, he had left his seat and walked over to the edge to look down at the arena. Seeing Peter on the screen had made him worry even more. Oh, no, Fex thought. The second he looked at his sister, he could tell from the expression on her face. She had discovered Peter. As soon as Peter had entered the arena and started to walk over to the platforms, in an instant, she could smell that there was someone different among them. Then when they further split up, she finally had spotted who and where the smell was coming from. I was meant to be the only one stationed at a military base. There were meant to be no others. Not only that, it's a subclass. Don't tell me. A worrying thought started to go through her head. It was clear that the subclass vampire was illegal. She would have been informed before coming otherwise. There were no doubts about it. The problem was who had created it. Was it her brother? If so, there might no longer be any way for her to save him anymore. After breaking so many rules, he would not get off with a light punishment. Unable to do anything in the middle of the tournament. For now, all she could do was keep an eye on the illegal, while continuing to judge her own fight, since it looked like she wouldn't be judging the battle with the illegal. Underneath the large, stone cylinders, 2 students stood either side. The pillars were spread evenly throughout the arena, allowing the audience to see a fight no matter where they were. But they also had screens that would display the other matches in case they were interested, and if some fights ended quicker than others. In the crowd, every so often, there were soldiers stationed, and this included General Duke. The audience didn't think it was so strange since it was the fighting tournament, but the reason for the high level of security was something else. Is everyone ready? During the fight with the student known as Peter, everyone is to keep an eye. They could come out at any second. Duke ordered into his communicator. The soldiers were there in case of an attack from Pure. In fact, there were even more soldiers than the audience knew of. For several members of the crowd were also disguised. Not knowing the importance of the member they had in question, they were also unclear how much effort they would make to rescue him. There was also the possibility that they weren't even going to rescue him at all. The 4 leaders and Supreme Commander were he. Any rescue attempt would require their full power, and in all the years before, there had never been an attack on the event. However, there was one thing they were sure about, and that was the fact that they would be watching. Jack, sitting in his booth, was excited. He didn't really expect anyone from Pew to come. That's why he wanted to put Peter up for the fight in the first place, so they could brutally see one of their own being beaten to death. By each of the pillars, there was an additional soldier down below. Their job was to catch anyone who would fall off the stage. As the first stage names were announced, the soldier below stomped his foot hard on the ground, and a smaller pillar raised the student onto the fighting platform. This was readily done as each of the students' names was being called. A chief followed with each name until, eventually, they had reached the last platform, Platform 10. The soldier stomped his foot, raising Larry Steele to the stage. And on stage 10, introducing Octopuncher. Looking at the screen from underground, Nate was slightly confused by the name choice. So you're not going to reveal your blood evolver in front of everyone. But what kind of lame name is that? The man then stomped his foot again, and a pillar rose from underneath Peter, allowing him to step onto the platform. And next, we have his opponent, ZombieP. When this name was called, there wasn't much of a reaction from the crowd in the arena. However, the students above and below underground were stunned, and Nate couldn't keep his jaw closed. As Peter's name was revealed to the audience, there seemed to be a strange reaction between a few people, and others started to notice this shift. The VR game that Peter played, Power Fighters, was very popular, and the user ZombieP had become a hot topic amongst players. However, there were a few important things to note. Not everyone who played the game visited the forums. Only those that truly enjoyed the game like Nate and Sam were a part of this group. Second of all, the servers that Peter played on were the military servers, meaning the only people who knew about Peter were the military students themselves. Still, the strange reaction caused by the students above started to spread like fire. When one or two would start to talk and murmur, others beside them would ask what was so interesting. Is he really ZombieP? A student asked. Maybe he's just a fan. Can someone explain to me who ZombieP is? You don't know. He's quite well known in the VR game Power Fighters. The students were busy sharing information and videos of ZombieP's performance in the game, and soon nearly every student now knew about ZombieP. However, those who were in Dell's class were confused as the video clearly showed the person in the video had a regenerative ability, while the Peter they knew was an Earth user. Those that knew Peter couldn't believe the connection. It just didn't make any sense. Although Peter's information was being spread between the students, the same couldn't be said for the people in the arena. They had come from outside of the military, and even though the game was popular on the outside, they didn't have access to the military servers and knew nothing of the name. This was the same for Jack and the others in the booth as well. While they all had their eyes spread, watching all the participants fighting, Jack was mainly focused and excited for the beatdown that Peter was about to receive. "Wait, you're friends with ZombieP?" Sam asked, shocked by what he had just found out. The others had told him they were mainly watching the fighting tournament because of Peter, but didn't explain much else. Unknown to them that this type of reaction was going to happen. The fact that everyone was talking about Peter came as a surprise even to them. "Wait, can somebody please explain to me, what is the big deal about Peter being called ZombieP?" Layla asked. "I guess I should explain this one since it's partly my fault," Logan said. "One day, when I was busy doing my usual tinkering away at my workbench, Peter had decided to play the game. Unbeknownst to me, he was causing quite a stir in the online world and had become infamous because of his powerful regenerative abilities." Logan was unable to go into further detail due to Sam being there, but there was quite a difference between Peter's ability in the game and the one out there. The game had managed to copy Peter's unique body structure. Rather than ability, it determined his body was what was causing the extraordinary healing. This was why it allowed him to use his abilities in the game the same way Quinn could use his as well. But just how Quinn was able to use his blood abilities with no drawback, Peter could use his regenerative abilities as well, making him nearly invisible in the game. In real life, this wasn't the case. Peter did have extraordinary healing abilities, but if he was pushed to the edge, he would no longer heal until he was fed. Let's just hope True Dream isn't planning something stupid. Nate nearly exploded into excitement after hearing the user's name. Now he thought he understood why they were heavily guarding him. Noticing his watch level showing a 1, there must have been something different about this person. Perhaps they didn't want the secret to being revealed. Either way, Nate was beyond excited. He was going to watch a match between two infamous people from the game, the Blood Evolver versus ZombieP. Ladies and gentlemen, the match will now begin. The buzzer had sounded, and the fight had now started on the 10 platforms. There was quite a mix to the sound of the buzzers going off. Some students charged in immediately, causing fireworks and sparks to fly as they battle, while others patiently circled the ring, waiting for the right chance to attack. Most of the attention was focused on the flashier matches and didn't pay attention to much else. Silver, who was one of the referees of another match, had her mind focused somewhere else. "I need to get this match over and done with as soon as possible." The two students she was watching were both female, and the two of them continued to circle each other, waiting for one of them to attack. "Come on," Silver thought. At last, one of the female students swirled her hands around and blasted a hydro pump full of water. A strong stream of water came out from the palm of her hand and was heading straight for the other student. The distance was great between the two, and the other contestant was not worried about an attack like this. She would easily be able to avoid. But then, she noticed Silver walking around the edge of the ring. This was fine. As a ref, one needed to reposition themselves to stop the fight at any moment, just like a boxing match. For a second, though, the two of their eyes met. The stress was now heading towards her. "What's this? I can't move." The student was shocked. She screamed at her body to jump out of the way, but it just wasn't listening to her for some reason. "Am I that nervous?" she thought, but it was now too late. The powerful stream of water had hit her right in the chest, causing her to be lifted off her feet and sent her flying through the air. She was now off the platform and was falling down below, but soon she felt her back hit against a solid ground. I'm alive," she said, feeling her heart beating rapidly. When she stood up, she noticed she was on a makeshift pillar that was slowly descending back into the ground. The Earth soldier below had raised a new platform as soon as he saw her fall off the platform. "We have our first winner," the announcer said. The female student was upset and was still confused about what had happened, but she was only a first-year student and put it down to the fact she must have been more nervous than she thought. "Finally, now, I can focus," Silver said. During the fight, when the student's eyes had met with hers, she had activated her daze power, freezing her for a moment. Her goal was to end the fight as quickly as possible, and it seemed to work. Now she could freely watch the illegals battle. That was a little strange," Owen said, sitting inside the booth till playing with his long hair. "Did you notice something?" Oscar, the Supreme Commander asked. You didn't? It must have been my imagination then. He replied. It's quite hard to focus on one fight in particular when so many are going on. Monarch said. Many of them had already chosen to form the initial inspection, which they wanted to watch. From a glance at equipment, it was usually easy to tell which students were stronger. Good equipment indicated they were strong enough to slay that beast in the first place. However, this wasn't always the case, as some received more support from their family members than others. On the other hand, Owen was only interested in one person, and that was Silver, and this was the reason he had paid attention to their fight. While Jack had his pure attention focused on one fight, and it looked like something interesting was going on that particular platform. When the fight had started, Larry immediately had gotten into a fighting stance. He had his gauntlets and full beast gear on. Everything seemed to be at the intermediate level, and looking at him reminded him a little bit of Quinn. Although as soon as he got in a wide fighting stance that changed, as Quinn usually fought more freely, adapting as he went along. Larry waited and waited for Peter to do something until eventually, Peter raised his hand in the air. I forfeit from the match. He said. Peter didn't care about this match, and fighting meant there was a chance revealing himself and Quinn. Originally, he wanted to fight but thought this was for the best, even if he was to die. The words had been spoken loud and clear, and Peter even raised his hand to signal this to the reference. Even so, the ref stood there in silence. It was as if he had never even heard the words in the first place. I said, I forfeit. Peter shouted. There were no mics on the students, and the platforms, along with the noise from the crowd, was far too loud and far for anybody to hear. Seeing this, Jack started to giggle inwardly to himself. You think you can just give up? No. No matter what you do, you can't run away from this fight. The whole audience and that disgusting organization of yours are going to see you be beaten till you can no longer move in front of everyone. The other matches seemed to be ending faster than expected, as the participants continued to be announced as winners. This was half-expected from the first group, as they were all composed of first-year students. The event was set up this way, so the stronger first-year students would proceed and have a better chance of fighting against the second-year students in the later rounds. Between the first-year students, there was quite an immense power and skill gap. This gap would mostly be the case on the first day as the weakest students were thinned out. This way, the fights that were to be shown later on through the week wouldn't be so quick to end. The fighting event seemed to be drawing to a close, as there were only 3 platforms with fights still going on, with one of these being Peter's. So this is your grand plan, a setup? Peter thought. The tournament had to be rigged from the beginning. The judge not replying was an indicator he was working for Jack, and his job was to make it so Peter was unable to surrender or forfeit no matter what. Is the student working for Jack as well? It was now hard for Peter to tell who was working for Jack and who wasn't. If he was able to set it up so, all of these things fell in place. There was a good chance the student, the ref, and the sodder below who was meant to catch him were in on the whole plan as well. There's another way, Peter said as he looked at the edge of the arena. But if his suspicions were correct and the man below also worked for Jack, there was no way the man would try to catch him. From this height, his legs would shatter and would have to be regenerated on the spot, revealing his powers. If his powers were going to be revealed one way or another, he would have rather done it fighting instead. Larry was tired of waiting and finally decided to charge in. As he rushed forward, he made a loud war cry and banged his 2 gauntlets fists together. If he could, Peter would have liked to win this fight without showing his regeneration abilities. He needed to be careful and figure out just what his opponent's ability was, especially since he was a level 6 ability user. Making sure not to stay too close to the edge, Peter decided to also come forward. Larry had beast gear on that was also enhancing his speed, while Peter wore nothing. Still, he managed to match his speed, and the 2 of them met dead straight in the center. A fist was thrown, and Peter moved his head out of the way, avoiding it by a few inches as the strike went past his face. The attack was powerful, and the air around it had caused his hair to move. From Larry's other hand, a wide swing was thrown. This time Peter responded by juking underneath it. Your friend's good at dodging at least, Sam said, From his experience, although those blows looked wild, they still came out at a good speed and with full commitment. It was clear with the first few punches that Larry was not the blood evolver. There was no finesse in the punches, just raw power. Still, if the blows connected, it was also clear they would do quite a bit of damage. Fex continued to watch the fight nervously. If he was right in guessing that Peter was actually created by Quinn and Peter was a white, it meant Peter, in terms of stats, was just as good as Quinn. The longer the fight went on, the more chances of Silver finding out, if she didn't know already. After dodging a few more punches, Peter was still wondering just when Larry was going to use his ability. He didn't want to make the first move until he had uncovered this secret. Another 2 swings from the side came one after another, but then suddenly, Peter felt something grab him around the waist, and then something else held him tightly around the legs. When looking down, he could see what had latched onto him. A set of arms had grabbed him by the legs, and another set by his biceps, while the other 2 were where they should have been in the usual place. Right now, all the other fights had finished as it took a while before Peter's officially got going, which meant all screens were on him, and everyone could see him being lifted in the air by 4 arms. "Haha, this is perfect," Jack said. "What perfect timing for everyone to see what is about to happen." The others in the room thought Jack was a little too happy watching the students fight. Apart from Oscar, the others never really got on well with Jack in the first place. Looking down at the arms, Peter remained calm as usual. He no longer feared death. Maybe this was because he was already dead. He then started to look at the arms closely and started to count. 1, 2, 3.45, 6. Suddenly, Peter began to chuckle to himself. "What's so funny?" Larry said, annoyed, and also a little concerned when he felt like he had his opponent trapped. Most of the beast gear that he had on had a unique trait to enhance one's strength. This was perfect for Larry. With his ability to grow extra limbs, it meant he had more power than an average person in each of his arms. "I never knew I was fighting with an idiot. Was your name Octopuncher? Shouldn't you have 8 arms and not 6? Peter asked. For a moment, Larry stood there still, and soon he began to realize his mistake. His cheeks started to turn bright red, and his face felt hot. He didn't have a stage name before coming today, and when they had asked him, he thought of the best thing he could come up with at the time. "Ugh!" he screamed. "I'll kill you." Continuing to hold Peter in place with his other arms, he pulled back both his fist and punched Peter directly in the ribs. A cracking sound was heard, and the bones moving and fracturing could be felt in Larry's knuckles. Peter's body reacted to the attack, and the expression on his face changed as the air was punched out of him, but no screams were heard, as no pain was felt. However, Larry was too angry to even realize this and continued to punch Peter repeatedly. After breaking his ribs, he went on to move his body around and hit his forearms and lifted him up to beat his legs. The whole audience was able to see the one-sided match on the screen. "This is not the blood evolver," Nate said, disappointed as he clicked his tongue and looked away from the screen. The man he was watching was nothing more than a wild beast. The others continued to watch and were wondering why the referee hadn't stopped the match yet. They could see him standing there clearly watching such a one-sided fight, but did nothing to interfere. Some of the other referees had decided to stop fights before it had even gotten to this stage. In the end, it was up to the ref in the ring to determine when to stop the fight. They had information the others didn't know, such as student abilities, just in case it was all part of the plan. "Don't you think the match should be stopped soon?" Layla asked. "If you were to ask me, I think that ref is a little dainty," Vorden replied. Finally, the punching rampage had stopped, and he allowed Peter to fall to the ground, retracting his arms back into his body. When Peter fell, the bones in his shins were now shattered. There was no attempt to lift himself as he couldn't even stand up. He just lay there having fallen to the ground. At this point, Larry was already walking away. "This match is over," Larry said to the ref. Although many in the arena thought the match was over, including the ones in the booth, the opinions of many of the students were different, including Sam. "Well, if is the real ZombieP, then the match has only just begun," said Sam. It had only been a short time, less than a minute had passed, and Peter's legs had already healed. He stood up from the floor slowly as his arms and ribs were still under repair. His body was twisting and turning in positions impossible if one's bones weren't broken. And everything slowly started coming back into place. Finally, Peter was once again back to his usual self. "Well, it turns out one person didn't disappoint me," said Nate. "You really are the real ZombieP." Peter moved his neck side to side, making sure everything worked as normal. "Well, now my ability was revealed to everyone anyway," Peter said. If Peter was to allow himself to take another beating like that, then after regenerating once more, there was a high chance he would need to eat human flesh again. Although they knew this secret of his, they didn't know the whole part, and the eating flesh was a bigger problem than the first one. Now his secret was out. He had no choice. He needed to fight back to not give out any other information up to them. "I like it better this way," he said with a smile. Everyone in the arena now thought they understood why the ref hadn't stepped in. It must have been due to the knowledge he had known beforehand. The ref must have known that the student had a powerful regeneration ability. But the truth of the matter was that the ref was just as shocked as everyone else. He had been informed beforehand that the student had a transformation ability. The audience members were too far away and the screen never focused long enough for them to tell what level Peter's wristwatch had shown. They all just knew he must have had a powerful regeneration ability, and now it made sense why they had allowed him to fight in the tournament. However, the participants knew differently, having seen not only his level but the number of guards that were always around him. Is he some type of mutant? They thought. Now as for Jack, who was sitting in the booth, he wasn't upset by this sudden change in surprise. Instead, he was excited but at the same time concerned, for he was thinking along the same lines as the students. He had gotten so excited, he stood up from his seat. This has to be the doing of Pyo, he thought. Duke had already confirmed he had a transformation ability, and before that there had been reports of him having an oath ability. How Pyo finally managed to create a monster. For years, organizations and different research institutes had dabbled in the possibility of allowing a student to have more than one ability. Due to the human cell structure, it seemed impossible, but they progressed onward. To Jack, it seemed like Pure must have been able to finally succeed in creating a body that was able to have more than one ability. He might be even more important to them than I first thought. Knowing this new piece of information, Jack was determined to continue his plan of luring out Pure. He was unsure whether or not they had made more people like Peter, but even if they hadn't, they would hate the idea of the military getting their hands on something they themselves had yet to discover. "You hypocritical bastards," he thought as he sat back down in his seat. The crowd continued to cheer away, and now the students were keeping a closer eye on the match than before. "Did I miss much?" a voice from behind Layla said. "Quinn," she replied. It looked like Quinn had returned and was in one piece, which meant he must have dealt with the problem. Layla gulped when she thought of the possibilities of getting rid of that problem. "So what happened? Is CIA?" She couldn't finish a sentence for fear of the answer she would hear back. "She's alive, but it's complicated," he replied. Pulling off Layla to one side, he decided it was best to explain the full details of what had happened as soon as possible, especially since this involved her. Back at the hotel lobby place, around the corner where the elevators were located, Quinn was alone with CIA. When Quinn had activated his influence skill, her eyes had hollowed out and it looked like his skill had worked. Before, it looked like it had nearly worked, and now with his charm points increased, it seemed to just be enough to push her over the edge. Not wanting to waste this golden opportunity, Quinn decided it would be best to ask her some simple questions. He had tried asking her what Pure were planning to do at the event. However, he quickly realized that for some reason, any question that was about Pure would be answered with nothing. It was almost scary even to him. Every time he would ask them a question, she would try and search her pocket as if by automatic response. Usually, when one was under influence, they would be unable to control anything. There were two things that Quinn could think of as to how this was possible. Either his influence skill was barely working on her and she was still fighting back, or there was some even stronger type of mind control going on at Pew, behind the scenes. Seeing that she repeatedly tried to reach into her pockets, Quinn decided to reach in and grab whatever she was trying to get. Inside one of the pockets, he had discovered a white pill. What its use was for he did not know. Inside the back pocket, there seemed to be a small little white remote. Afraid it might have been a recorder or something else, Quinn had crushed it to pieces on the spot. It would have been nice to give it to Logan, but he couldn't take any chances, and Layla had also informed him of CIA having something like this beforehand. If he was to find such a thing, he was told to destroy it on the spot. Since Quinn was unable to answer any questions, he feared that perhaps the next part wouldn't have worked either. This was the tricky part. How much did CIA know? Being an agent of Pew, she always had kept an eye on Layla and had been with her from the beginning. If he was only to remove the events from today and the Orange Portal expedition, there was a chance that Pew would be able to fit multiple pieces of the puzzle together. He couldn't risk it. There was only one thing he could do: erase everything. He only said 2 words, unsure of what it might have done. He had asked the system beforehand, and he said she would be able to live and talk, so it should be okay, but whether or not she could live a normal life again, he did not know. Removing this much information was considered dangerous. After giving the command, her eyes whitened even further, and then the reflection of red was seen. This was the sign that his command had worked. Not wanting to be there when she came to, Quinn decided to quickly head back out to the others. He turned to look back at her one time, before deciding to head off again. A short time had passed, and CIA, who was on the floor, had come to. She lifted herself off the floor with a banging pain in her head. She placed her hand, making sure she wasn't injured, and started looking around at her surroundings. "What is this place?" she asked. Then something had hit her even worse. "Who am I? What's my name?" CIA couldn't remember anything. Not her birth date, not how old she was, or even the fact she was attending military school. The only thing she could remember was how to speak and her normal bodily functions. Realizing this, a natural reaction had occurred as she broke down in tears and screamed out. After hearing everything Quinn had to say, for some reason she felt bad for CIA. She hated Pure, but not CIA herself. Still, she knew it had to be done. Getting rid of her memories would be better than death. At least that's what she thought. "So do you know what this pill is?" Quinn asked as he handed it over. "All agents carry one with them. It's poison," Layla explained. "If we were ever caught and in a situation where we think we might be exposed, we're meant to take it instantly." That's kind of messed up. Quinn let slip, forgetting for a second that Layla was a part of this messed up organization. "Anyway, do you know what they are planning or what will happen now?" Layla shook her head in response. "I have no clue. My rank in the organization was never high enough, and it seems like they opted to tell me nothing now. My guess is as good as yours." With everything explained, Layla and Quinn decided to return to the rest of the group. They quickly updated Quinn on the events of the fight so far, and he only had one thing he could say in response. "It looks like there's nothing we can do right now apart from one thing." Quinn walked up to the ledge and looked down at the fighting platforms below. He lifted both his hands by his mouth and made a cone shape. Taking in a large, deep breath as loud as he could, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Kick his ass until he can no longer walk." It was a long distance, and even though his voice was projected very loud, the audience were unable to hear him. But that wasn't important. Quinn only needed one person to hear his words. Walking towards Larry slowly, Peter raised his hand and gave a thumbs up in the direction of Quinn. "Now I even have permission." After watching the fast-paced regeneration of the student, Silver pretty much confirmed her suspicions. The student that was known as Peter was a white. There weren't many things out there with such a fast healing speed. The only other thing that had a similar healing speed was Wendigo's, but it was clear that Peter had kept most of his human appearance, so it ruled that possibility out. Now that there weren't as many fights going on, she could also concentrate and found that there was no heartbeat. All these things led to the conclusion that he was a white. This could be a little troublesome or fairly easy to deal with. If the white was created by Fex, then it would be impossible for her or him to kill it, and she would have to find some other way to get rid of it. There was no way she could leave now knowing what was out and about. Without a ladder, they could quickly go out of control. If it wasn't created by Fex, then that could be even worse. If possible, she would have liked Fex to deal with the situation, as he was able to move about more freely within the students than she could. But if it was created by someone else, and the vampire turned out to be quite powerful, it might be too much for him to handle, and she would in the end personally have to deal with it. Whatever the case was, she would keep a close eye observing the white's strength. There was no longer any need for Peter to hold back. The military already thought he was strange after finding out he had several abilities. The worst thing that could happen was he would need to feed again, and that was the worst outcome. Knowing this and having the element of surprise, Peter continued to walk forward slowly. For some reason, Larry didn't know why, but he felt an immense amount of pressure. It wasn't the fact that Peter was giving out such a feeling. It was because someone who he was sure he had already defeated was now walking perfectly fine. This type of situation messed with one's head, and it didn't quite make sense to Larry. "I beat you up once. I can just do it again," Larry shouted as he tried to psyche himself up to go in for the attack. Shouting out a war cry once again. This time, the four hands had come out of his back before charging in. The boots on his feet slightly went a bronze color as he activated the equipment, allowing him to move slightly faster. Then, planning to do the same thing as last time, the gauntlets were activated as well. "I'm not taking any chance. I'm taking you down in one blow." Surprisingly, Larry was moving a lot faster than Peter had suspected, but it still wasn't fast enough. Knowing full well he needed to avoid the attacks, at the right time as Larry went for the grab, Peter jumped back, allowing himself to be just out of reach from the grab. With a dash, Peter tried to go around the side, but Larry wasn't going to let him get behind him. One hand retracted from his left side and popped out of the right side, swinging his fist out at the same time. Peter seeing this threw a fist of his own, but he wasn't holding back. "You idiot. Maybe you can heal, but you can't match my power," Larry thought. The two fists collided, and to his surprise, their strength was currently equal. One fist didn't push back the other, but the power was so strong that the bones in both of their fists were completely shattered. "Ah!" Larry winced in pain and slightly flinched, while Peter hadn't stopped moving. The pain had no effect, and by the time he was around the back of Larry, his fist had already finished healing. "He's so fast. Are you sure he doesn't have the ability of speed as well? How can someone move that quick?" Sam thought, watching from above. Fex looked over at Quinn and thought back to when he had fought against the King Tier beast. That's his speed, and with the boots, Quinn was even faster than that. If people saw Quinn fight in this event, just what would the reaction be to him? "This boy is good," Owen said, ignoring the things he's displaying. For now, he knows how to use his unique traits to his advantage. At this point, Jack was grinding his teeth backwards and forwards. He never expected Peter to be this skillful. He was happy at first finding out he had the regenerative ability as well as the transformation ability, but this was unexpected. The aim was for him to lose the fight. Larry spun his body around, hoping to slam his gauntlet fist right into Peter's head. With the added strength of the gauntlets, his power should have overpowered Peter's. Seeing this, Peter didn't care to dodge but instead lifted his left arm right up to his head, while throwing out a punch of his own. In a fight, the best time to throw a punch is when your opponent is throwing a punch of their own. "A counterpunch," Nate said, looking at the screen already knowing the outcome of the fight. Larry's fist had hit Peter's arm and had shattered his forearm, but the blow was blocked. In contrast, Peter's strike had all his power behind it, as well as the momentum of Larry coming spinning and coming towards him. As Peter's fist dug into his face, it had twice the power of what a punch form Peter would usually have. Parts of teeth went flying out from his mouth, and blood started to gush from his nose as his head was flung back. The white in his eyes could be seen, and the loud sound of the heavy body hitting the floor was heard. The ref rushed to the body on the floor and soon raised his hand. The winner, ZombieP. The single punch from Peter was all it took. Larry had been defeated. Slamming his fist down on his chair, Jack stood up from his seat and stormed off out of the room. "What's wrong with him? Did he have a bet on the other kid to win?" Mona asked. "Don't be silly," Oscar replied. "You know we don't allow those types of things." I believe he had been paying close attention to Larry for a while now and was planning to invite him into his family. This might have been quite a shock to him. Just leave him be. Outside of the booth, Jack continued to walk down the hallway. He was doing his best to try to calm down. Pure hadn't come out, and he had spent a lot of time preparing everything, and it seemed to be all a waste. Sure, he could still get his revenge just by reporting Peter or killing him in secret, but that wasn't good enough for Jack. He still remembered the embarrassment he received last time when they had taken both the students right in front of his very eyes. "You think you can make a fool out of me?" he shouted. "We'll see that the fighting event isn't over yet. You think your little experiment is strong? Well then, let's see how well it does against a real opponent." Jack started to laugh hysterically down the long corridor when his voice could be heard back at the booth. "Some people in this world shouldn't have the power they have," Owen said out loud and clear, making sure everyone had heard what he said in the booth. "Does that include you?" Boney asked. Owen shrugged his shoulders. Who knows? The event had come to a finish for the day, and there were several surprises for more than one. The audience was excited to return to see everything tomorrow, and the students who hadn't taken part in anything were restless. When they all returned to the competitors' room, they were eager to go out on the platform for the evening to expend all the energy they had pent up. Quinn and his group had decided to meet up at one of the coffee stalls. It was a bit late for coffee, but they wanted to discuss the possibilities that might happen to Peter, as well as update everyone about what had happened so far with CIA. They hadn't invited Sam this time, so they could talk freely, but did however plan to meet him tomorrow to watch the rest of the events. Quinn was the last one to arrive at the coffee shop, and sitting outside was Logan, Layla, and Vorden. As he walked up and took a seat, he noticed one was empty. "Where's Fex?" "He said he wasn't feeling well tonight and would join us a little later," Vorden replied. The truth was, Fex had a prior appointment tonight. On the very top of Hotel 4, if one was to look closely, they still wouldn't be able to see anything. But perhaps if one had a pair of binoculars, they would be able to see two figures. It was windy up at the top, but it was away from the eyes of any type of camera and was in a place that would have been hard to reach for many. "Let me ask you something, dear brother," Silver said in a sarcastic tone. "Did you know about the illegal?" After the fighting event matches had ended, the participants had been taken to the medical office to have their wounds taken care of. Even those who hadn't received anything major injuries still needed to have a quick checkup done to them. For once, Haley was pleased that she wasn't one of the only doctors in the whole place, and it seemed like the rest had everything handled. She felt like it was one of the most leisurely days in her life, but perhaps she had said that too soon. In the middle of checking up all the students, she had been called over to check up on one of the students from their own military base. However, it wasn't one of the students who had taken part in the fighting tournament as she had first thought. When she entered the hospital-like room and turned around the corner, she was surprised to see a short-haired, purple female student. "We don't know what's wrong with her," one of the nurses said as they took Haley around the corner. "It seems like she can't remember anything. Her name, where she's from, what day it is. She's in a major shock, and we don't really know what to do. That's why we decided to call you over." After being updated about the situation from the nurse, Haley knew this wasn't going to be an easy one. For some reason, it seemed stranger events than usual were happening this year. The female nurse had left the room to leave Haley alone with the student while she carried on to perform her other duties. As she left the room, she bumped into a man wearing the same type of scrubs as her. It was a male nurse. "Is everything okay there?" the man asked. The female nurse then looked around to see if there was anyone else down the hallway before spilling the student's details. The man looked concerned after hearing the information and wished her a speedy recovery. The man continued to walk down the hallway and placed his hand by his ear. "This is Agent 66. I have an update on the situation. Asterisk. Inside the pure metallic base, Agent 5 was busy sitting at her desk in quite a small-spaced room. She continued to twiddle her fingers on the table as she thought about what to do. She finally stood up from her seat and opened up a digital display with all sorts of photos and numbers on the screen. As she moved her hand slightly above the pictures and words, they would move with it. Agent 100 is no longer answering her communicator. According to Agent 66, she did as asked and dropped out of the first-round tournament. But due to the events surrounding Agent 72, we no longer know if the information was received or not. The question is, why is Agent 100 no longer answering her communicator? She then shifted her hand and brought up Agent 72's information. Beside it, there was a photo of CIA. With her memories being completely wiped, Agent 72 is as good as dead to us. We have no clue whether they were able to get anything out of her or not. Perhaps it might not be the best idea to go ahead with the attack after all. It was a tough decision, and it all was up to Agent 5 to make. She closed down the holographic display and went back into her seat. I've decided. This operation is too risky. We will no longer plan to attack the event. A decision had been made. On the rooftop of Hotel 4, the two figures were the only things standing there. The wind continued to blow up an intense high in the sky. Illegal. Who's done something illegal? This is the first time I've heard of such a thing, Fex replied nervously. He couldn't even look directly at his sister and continued to peer out of the corner of his eye to see what type of face she was making. When finally their two eyes met, he regretted it instantly as it was one that looked like a demon. No more games. Fex, this has become a serious matter now. Silver replied. This was it. He couldn't hide this from his sister, and he had already expected a result such as this one to happen. Knowing fully well what was going to happen, he had already decided what he would do. He was never going to give up his blood brother Quinn. He saved his life, and in return, he would save his. Did you create that thing? She asked. No, Fex replied in a composed voice this time, to show this was no laughing matter. When I arrived, he had discovered the illegal. At first I thought one of the 13 families had created it, but after realizing it was a white, I realized its master must have been close. I kept a close eye on who that could be and finally found out. This piece of information needed to be revealed to her. The important part of Fex's plan was he needed Silver to stop looking. Sooner or later, she would have gone looking and found Quinn by his smell. Oh, since when did Fex become a little detective? Silver replied. The law states we can kill illegals on the spot. If we know the creator is in the school, then let's finish off the illegal and return with the vampire. An expected response. His sister was quite predictable because she always followed the rules and tried to deal with things the quickest way without getting others involved. This little piece of insider information was the only thing he could rely on. Suddenly Fex went down on one knee and placed one of his hands towards the ground. He made sure to keep his head facing the floor to show the appropriate respect. This was something that vampire only did to leaders, or lower ranks did to higher ranks. Although Silver was technically a higher rank than Fex, due to their positions within the family, he had never done this to her before, and it all came as a surprise. Please, Silver, let me deal with the illegal, and I promise I will bring the vampire back to you tonight. You know I wanted to stay on Earth as long as possible. The truth was I knew the family would send someone after me sooner or later. After I found an illegal here, I had been making notes and tracking the vampire and them down. I thought when they would take me back if I also handed them in, there was a chance my punishment could be made lighter. I could use it as an excuse as to why I stayed here so long. Please give me till the end of tomorrow, and I will bring them both to you. A part of what Fex had said was the truth. He really had planned this. He just never thought his sister would be the one to get him. If he returned with the shadow vampire user, then his punishment would have been light. Silver thought about this for a while. Fex had broken a severe rule, but not enough to be put into eternal slumber. But there was a chance he could be put into temporary sleep for hundreds of years. She would hate to be apart from her brother for so long. If Fex caught these criminals, then there was a chance the punishment could be lightened. All right, I agree with your request, but two things. She said. 1. Not tomorrow. You need to do everything tonight. Tonight? But that's too soon. There are guards and everything protecting the... Fex said worriedly. If you can't do it tonight, then I will do it myself tomorrow. This will be a test for you. And the second thing. The vampire must be brought to me, but the white must be eliminated. He knew this was the best he was going to get, and in a way, it was a better result than he had expected. Fine, I shall bring the vampire to you and kill the white. Fex answered. The two of them quickly vanished, and now there was no longer anything on the roof. It was as if nothing was ever there.